I was sitting at the outdoor dining table of a private villa in the San Juan Islands when my father slid a black device across the table toward me. Beyond the railing, the bay was flat as glass. There was lemon water in my glass. I had no idea that the small box resting on the teak had been built to take away everything my mother had left behind, or that before 9 o'clock that night, I would have to escape the island. My name is Sophie Mercer. I am 37 years old. I conduct digital investigations for a firm in Washington, D.C. My job is to find forged electronic signatures and access logs someone has rewritten. For the past 12 years, I have helped hundreds of people prove they did not do what the records said they had done. Not once did I imagine I would open my own father's file. Dinner started at 7. For the first hour, no one spoke to me. They talked about the IPO. Cipheron Systems was going public in 4 days at a valuation of $3.8 billion. My father repeated that number 3 times in 3 different sentences, stressing it differently each time, like a man testing a microphone. Lauren sat across from me, turning the stem of her glass between 2 fingers and saying she would be the youngest CEO in the company's history, that the communications team had already booked 4 interviews for the following week, and that one newspaper wanted to photograph her in the server room. "They want a picture of you too," Lauren said without looking at me. "A family photo. I told them you don't like having your picture taken." Victoria smiled and rested a hand on Lauren's wrist. She had chosen the seat with the best lighting, immediately to my father's right. I finished my fish and counted the exits. The door to the main hallway, the glass door leading down the stone steps to the grounds, the small door behind the bar leading into the service area. I did that in every room and had for so long that I no longer noticed myself doing it. When the server cleared the plates, my father opened his leather briefcase. He set the device in front of me, exactly where my plate had been. A black plastic block with a glass top, about the size of a notebook. Beside it, he placed a thin packet of papers fastened with a brass brad. "It's only a family certification," he said. "The underwriters need to see that there are no remaining disputes over the technology within the family. Put your finger here for exactly 4 seconds, and then we'll order dessert." I did not reach out. I pulled the packet toward me. And over the next minute, I stopped being his daughter. The device bore no label from any independent audit firm. There was no security seal, no embossed serial number, no logo from a third-party certification authority. A device like that should have been supplied by an independent party and used under the supervision of its representative. The authentication code displayed on the screen was not in the correct format. I had read thousands of codes like it. This one was missing a segment and contained a symbol that did not belong to any legitimate authentication authority I knew. The system clock in the upper right corner was 17 minutes behind my watch. The offset was too exact to be accidental. Someone had set it that way and had done it deliberately. The previewed terms were 3 pages long. The counter in the lower corner of the screen read, 11 documents. I read that number 3 times. I was being shown 3 pages. My finger would sign 11 things. "I want to see all 11 documents," I said. My father did not change his tone. He never changed his tone. That was what people who only saw him on television never understood about him. "They contain trade secrets," he said. "You no longer work for this company." Victoria set down her glass. "Sophie, I think it's time you let someone else be happy for once." She spoke just loudly enough for the 2 employees standing at the bar to hear. "Your father brought you here. He paid for your ticket. And you sit there reading papers as if you're interrogating someone." "She's always like this," Lauren said. "She can turn passing the salt into an investigation." There was still a 10-year-old girl somewhere inside me, and that girl wanted to put her finger on the glass so everyone would stop looking at her that way. I knew that girl very well. I had spent 27 years refusing to listen to her. My father leaned across the table. He lowered his voice until only I could hear him, the same voice he had once used to read me bedtime stories. "Just 1 fingerprint," he said. "Then you can go back to your little life." I kept my hand still in my lap. Then my phone vibrated once beneath the table. I leaned slightly, just enough to see the screen light up against my skirt. It was a number I had never saved. "Do not touch the key. It is creating a federal confession in your name I read the message 3 times, then looked up and smiled at my father. That was the first skill I learned at military school. When you realize what the person across from you is trying to hide, the first thing you do is keep your expression from changing. I didn't say I wouldn't sign, I said. I said I want to read it. Let me download a copy. I'll read it tonight, and I'll sign in the morning. No downloads, my father said. Then print it. Sophie. There are 11 documents, Dad. I only want to know what I'm signing. He leaned back and studied me for a long time. I knew that look. He was not angry. He was calculating what he had to do to leave me no way to refuse. They contain non-public information, he said. You understand what that means for a company about to go public. If those documents leave this room, the underwriters will pull the entire offering. It was a very good answer. Technically, it was true. It simply did not explain why I was the one who had to sign them. Then, let me call my attorney, I said. She can review them over the phone. I don't need a hard copy. Lauren placed her phone face up on the table so I could see the upper left corner. No service, she said, anywhere on the island. Security has been testing the new system since this afternoon, and they blocked the entire cellular band. Wi-Fi is only available in the operations room. I took my phone from my lap and placed it face up on the table as well. There were no signal bars. That message had come through. It had arrived while the entire island had no cellular service. I left the phone there for a few more seconds, then picked it up and turned it face down on my lap. I said nothing about it. Fine, I said. Tomorrow then. My flight is at 11 in the morning. I'll read everything on the plane and send the signed version from DC. The documents have to be on the underwriter's desk before midnight tonight, my father said. That was the first truth he had told me all evening. Before midnight. Not before the IPO. Not sometime this week. Before midnight tonight. I filed it away in my mind, besides 17 minutes and 11 documents. I need my passport, I said, in case I take an earlier flight tomorrow. Lauren lifted her champagne glass. I gave it to the assistant. They're changing the whole family's tickets to tomorrow afternoon, and they needed the documents. You'll get it back in the morning. She said it as casually as if she were talking about changing seats in a restaurant. I sat still and did what I always did. I counted. 2 men in dark jackets stood outside the glass door by the stone steps. They had not been there at 7. The electronic lock on the hallway door was glowing amber, which meant the people inside could not open it to leave. The last passenger boat left the main dock at 9. I knew because I had read the schedule when I arrived, out of habit. My watch read 8:42. 18 minutes to reach a dock I was not allowed to approach, without a passport, without cellular service, and with 2 men standing at the door. I'm going to ask this once, I said. Then I'll stop. Did Mom leave anything connected to Sentinel? Grant reached for his water glass. The movement lasted less than a second, but the glass was not positioned naturally for him to reach. My question had struck the right place. Rebecca wrote some of the code in the early stages, he said. Everyone knows that. None of it belongs to any individual. Then he turned to Lauren. Has New York confirmed the bell time? Victoria placed her napkin on the table. Sophie, do you remember what you did when you were 10? She asked in the tone of someone forced to mention an unpleasant fact. You took a security key from your mother's research lab. They had to send you away. And now you sit here at your father's table and tell us you don't trust anyone in this house. There was a silence, and in that silence I understood something. She had not mentioned it to hurt me. She had mentioned it to establish a foundation. If someone in that room had to be seen as untrustworthy that night, the foundation had been laid 27 years earlier. I pressed 2 fingers to my right temple and closed my eyes. I'm sorry, I said. My head hurts, a migraine, they come on fast. I'm going to wash my face in the restroom. 5 minutes. Sophie. 5 minutes, Dad. I stood and rested a hand lightly on the back of the chair, enough to make it shift on the wooden floor. Then I'll come back and sign. I pushed the chair back into place and left my purse beside my plate, as if I would only be gone a few minutes. My phone remained in the pocket of my dress, pressed against my thigh beneath the fabric. I carried exactly one visible item, the plastic guest card, closed in my palm. I had taken 4 steps. Behind me, my father spoke to the two men outside the glass door in a perfectly calm voice. "Do not let her leave the building until the documents are signed." I did not turn around to look at him. Not out of pride. I needed them to believe I was only looking for somewhere quiet to let the headache subside. I walked another 6 steps with one hand against my temple, pushed open the guest restroom door at the end of the hall, and locked it behind me. Then I leaned against the door and counted to 5. I took my phone from the pocket of my dress. A single flickering signal bar had appeared on the screen. Below it was a second message from the same number. "Maintenance door behind the laundry room, code 0417. Supply boat leaves in 12 minutes. I read the line and understood what I was facing. The sender knew the employee door code, the boat schedule, and exactly where I was. Far too much for a stranger. The person was either rescuing me or leading me into a trap that had already been prepared. I weighed the two possibilities for about 3 seconds. If I stayed, all I could do was delay. They controlled the documents, the communications, my passport, and every exit. Surrounded by 3 family members and 2 security guards, I could not win by sitting there and arguing. If I left, I would be stepping into a trap I did not understand. I chose the trap I did not understand. I took off my heels and carried them in my left hand. The stone floor was cold beneath my feet. I pulled out the pin holding my hair, tied it tightly at the back of my head, turned off Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and location sharing, lowered the screen brightness to the minimum, and disabled vibration. Then I opened the small ventilation window in the restroom wall, level with my eyes, and left it open. No one could fit through that window, but it would cost 2 of them 40 seconds to make sure of it. The service corridor was behind an unnumbered wooden door beside the ice machine. I swiped the guest card. The lock light turned green. The system had been misconfigured, exactly the kind of mistake I had written about in audit reports many times. Inside, the carpet ended. Concrete floor, gray-painted walls, the smell of hot fabric softener. The laundry room was at the end of the corridor. A man in a blue shirt stood folding towels with one earbud in, nodding his head to the music. He did not look up. The earbud and the stack of towels in front of him bought me a few more seconds. The maintenance door was behind him, painted gray, with a numeric keypad. 417. I entered the code. The light turned green. I stepped into an open metal stairwell that descended 2 stories to ground level. The air outside was damp and smelled of diesel. On a service cart at the bottom of the stairs was a stack of pale yellow plastic raincoats used by dock employees. I took one, pulled it over myself, and raised the hood. In the evening dress, I was Grant Mercer's daughter. In that raincoat, I was someone doing her job. Then the security system behind me was activated. I heard radio chatter, 3 broken bursts from 2 different directions. The upstairs corridor lights changed from yellow to white, the kind of lighting people turned on when they needed to find someone. Someone had opened the restroom door and seen the open window. My phone lit once in my pocket, even though I had disabled vibration. "Lorraine, stop playing games. You're destroying the family's only chance." I did not answer. I kept moving. The concrete road to the service dock was about 200 meters long, running behind the kitchen, past a row of large dumpsters and coils of electrical cable. I walked quickly but did not run. Anyone running through an employee area would draw attention immediately. My feet burned against the concrete. I still carried both shoes in my left hand, and I did not know why I had not left them behind. At the end of the road, black water opened before me. A steel-hulled supply boat about 10 meters long was idling, its cabin light yellow. 2 employees were removing the lines from the cleats. A man stood waiting on the deck who was not an employee. Worn jacket, gray at the temples, both hands empty. He stood still beside the rail, his eyes moving constantly between me and the building, as if he had been waiting longer than expected. I recognized him immediately, even though we had never met in person. His face appeared in 3 photographs in Cipheron technical records I had read out of curiosity about my father's company. Jonah Blake, Director of Systems Architecture. He held out a hand. I did not take it right away. "Who sent me those messages?" I asked. "I did." How did you know that door code? Because it was an old code from Cipheron's internal system. I took his hand and stepped aboard. The deck was slick. An employee released the final line. The strip of water between me and the island widened very quickly, faster than I expected. On shore, two flashlight beams began sweeping down the concrete road I had just traveled. Jonah did not look toward shore. He looked at me and delivered a sentence he had clearly prepared in advance, in the voice of a man finally handing over something he had carried too long. Your father doesn't just want to take the technology. He plans to have the FBI arrest you as soon as you sign. The boat took about 20 minutes to reach the mainland. I did not take off the raincoat during any of those 20 minutes. I sat on the metal bench along the starboard side, facing Jonah, with my back against the cabin wall. I chose that spot because my back was protected, and the exit remained in sight. I had just boarded the boat of a man I did not yet know I could trust. Say it again, I said, slowly. Jonah took a phone from his jacket and opened a screenshot. He did not send me the file. He simply angled the screen so I could read it, leaving the data on the original device. 3 days ago, I reviewed the data package being prepared for the IPO, he said. That's my job. I have to verify that every component in the product has a legitimate source before the filing goes out. There was a digital certificate in the authentication package. It was issued in your name. On the screen was a block of character strings and a line of subject information. My name. My date of birth. This certificate was issued last month, I said. Yes, then it isn't mine. I didn't apply for anything last month. It isn't yours. Jonah scrolled down, but the verification record behind the certificate is yours. The file number, identification photo, and fingerprint samples stored in the Bellcrest records were all included in the authentication package. I knew that name very well. I had lived there for 4 years. The boat rose slightly over a current. I kept a hand on the edge of the seat and stayed silent for about 5 seconds, because if I had spoken immediately, my voice would not have sounded the way I wanted it to. Explain why, I said. If they already have a digital certificate in my name, they can sign anything they want. Why do they still need my finger? Because a digital certificate can prove many things, except one. Jonah turned off the screen. It cannot prove you were physically present. The underwriters requested an in-person biometric confirmation because they saw something unclean in the chain of title. They want the real person, the real finger, one time. So if I put my finger on it tonight, I sign 11 documents, and that becomes the confirmation session. The forged certificate would be attached to that same biometric confirmation session, he said. When the data transfer is investigated, the record will show that you were present, personally certified ownership, personally transferred the technology overseas, and personally released everyone else from liability. I was silent for a few seconds. In my work, the hardest thing was not finding fake evidence. The hardest thing was finding fake evidence with 4 real seconds in the middle. The 4 seconds I placed my finger on the glass would be 4 seconds no one could invent, and everything false attached to those 4 seconds would become very difficult to separate from them. How long have you worked at Cipheron? I asked. 24 years. My mother mentored you. She mentored me in a research program when I was 21 and no one else wanted me. He looked down at the deck. 3 years later, I joined Cipheron. I helped her test the earliest versions of Sentinel. My name is still in some technical records. Hers is not. Since when? Since 2011. There was an internal document consolidation. After that, every client presentation identified Grant Mercer as the creator of Sentinel. And you watched it happen. I watched it happen. What did you do? Jonah did not answer immediately. He was looking for a kinder answer, then stopped looking. I kept a copy and did nothing, he said. My daughter has Crohn's disease. Her treatment depended on Cipheron's insurance. I told myself I would speak when I could. 15 years passed and I still did nothing. I understood his reason. But at that moment, I had not forgiven him. You waited 15 years, I said. Then you acted this week. Why this week? Because this week, they are no longer only hiding a fraud. He looked up at me. They are preparing to destroy someone who is still alive. What folder? He did not answer. Not on the boat, he said. The boat throttled down and came alongside a low concrete dock in Anacortes. The dock lights were yellow, and the air smelled of fish and oil. The two crew members threw the lines. In the parking lot above, a dark SUV waited with its lights off and engine running, its nose pointed directly toward the exit. That was how people parked when they wanted to leave immediately. The rear door opened. Two women sat inside. The woman on the left was about 45, with her hair tied low, a document case and a metal box resting on her knees. The woman on the right was slightly younger and wore a dark coat. I saw the shoulder holster under the coat before I saw her face clearly. "Sophie, I'm Maya Patel," the woman on the left said. "I represent North Shore Fiduciary Trust. This is Special Agent Elena Torres." Torres did not greet me. She studied me for about 3 seconds from head to toe, including my bare feet and the two shoes I still held in my left hand. "You're barefoot," she said. "I just walked 200 meters on concrete. Did you sign anything tonight?" "No." "Did you touch the device?" "No." Torres wrote a line in her notebook. She did not say she believed me, and I noticed that. The SUV pulled away. Maya placed the metal box on the center console between the rows of seats. It was the size of a small toolbox, with 2 locks and a faded label. "Before we reach the safe location, you need to know one thing," Maya said. "Because every decision you make between now and morning depends on it. Sophie, what is inside this box belongs to you. In fact, nearly all of Cipheron was built on something that belongs to you." The safe location was a conference room on the 2nd floor of a rented office building 4 minutes from the dock, above a marine supply store. Inside were a long table, 6 chairs, a wall-mounted screen, and an empty coffee maker. The windows were covered with frosted film. Torres checked the hallway before closing the door. Maya set the metal box on the table but did not open it. She opened her document case. "I need to say one thing first," she said. "I do not represent you. I represent a trust of which you are the beneficiary. That means I have a duty to show you the records and explain them accurately. I do not have authority to make decisions for you, and I will not do so even if you ask." "Good," I said. "Show me the originals, not copies." Maya slid the first set of documents across the table. I read for about 40 minutes, the same way I read every file that showed signs of manipulation. I focused on one question only. Did the papers actually say what people claimed they said? The file contained 18 patent families filed from 1996 through 1999. Across all 18 families, the name of the principal inventor was the same: Dr. Rebecca Ann Mercer, my mother. Jonah's name appeared in several technical testing appendices, exactly as he had said, but the core inventive rights, filing rights, and assignment rights all belonged to Rebecca. I checked the Intellectual Property Office seals. I checked the consecutive filing numbers. I checked every signature page. The signature ink crossed the pre-printed lines exactly as it would on a document signed by hand. There was no sign that an image had been inserted later. My mother's signature was authentic. I had not seen her handwriting in 27 years. I still remembered it. The lower loop of her B remained open. "This is the license agreement," Maya said, handing me the second packet. "Read Section 4 and Section 11. Cipheron Systems was granted the right to commercially exploit Sentinel for 27 years from the effective date of the agreement. Not ownership, only the right to use it commercially. During that term, Cipheron was prohibited from reselling ownership of Sentinel, transferring the technology to parties restricted under export control regulations, removing or altering attribution identifying the creator, signing, making representations, or conducting transactions on behalf of the beneficiary, using Sentinel in any unlawful activity." Section 11 stated that when the license expired, all decision-making authority would automatically revert to the beneficiary. Cipheron's consent was unnecessary, and the company had no right to prevent it. The third packet was only 1 page long. It named a single beneficiary, Sophie Mercer. I read my name twice. "Exactly when does the license expire?" I asked. "At 11:59 p.m. on August 2, Maya said. The bell ceremony is the morning of August 3. I set down my pen. My father had said the documents had to be on the underwriter's desk before midnight. I had filed the sentence away and assumed it was only an administrative deadline. It was not. Midnight tonight is the deadline for the underwriters to complete the chain of title, Maya said. If they do not receive your in-person signature, they cannot keep the August 3 listing date. Cipheron was preparing to enter the public market, with technology embedded in products that generated nearly 70% of its revenue, but the company could not prove ownership. Explain it to me in one sentence, I said. A sentence I can repeat to someone outside this field. Maya closed the packet. Your father was allowed to use your mother's key, she said. He was never allowed to own it. I sat still for a while. Then I asked the question I had known I would have to ask from the moment I entered the SUV. During those 27 years, did anyone ever send me a letter about any of this? Maya handed me the thickest file. 41, she said. The trust was required to notify the beneficiary periodically. North Shore sent every notice according to the address instructions in the file. I looked at the delivery addresses. 41 letters over 27 years, sent to 3 addresses. From 1999 through 2003, Bellcrest Academy, Administrative Office, forwarded through the Guardian's office. From 2003 through 2012, a mailbox in Bellevue registered to a company I had never heard of. From 2012 to the present, an address in Seattle I recognized immediately because I had mailed Christmas cards there for 9 consecutive years. It was my father's private office. I had not lived at any of those 3 addresses after I turned 14. Who changed the addresses? I asked. Each time an address changed, North Shore received an instruction bearing the Guardian's signature or an electronic signature in your name, Maya said. After you turned 18, the records continued to show that you agreed to receive notices through a representative address. What about after I turned 18? I asked. The trust had to receive confirmation that notice was received. Who confirmed it? You did, Maya said. She handed me a summary sheet. It listed 13 electronic acknowledgments from 2007 through 2024. Each bore a digital signature in my name. I reviewed the timestamps and recognized the pattern immediately. Everyone had been created during the same morning time window on Pacific time on a business day. During those 17 years, I had lived in 3 time zones and worked 4 years of night shifts. That timing pattern did not belong to me. It belonged to an office. I need the native files for all of these acknowledgments, including the metadata, I said, not printouts. I need to know what device issued them, what network address they came from, and what administrator account validated them. Maya looked at me, and for the first time that night, she seemed to release some of the weight she had been carrying. You are the first person in 17 years to ask me that question, she said. The trust never checked? North Shore verified the signatures against the identity records and communication instructions that were valid at the time, Maya said. All of those records were in your name. If the original records were false, we authenticated each new document using the same false data that already existed. A closed system. Each new lie authenticated by the lie before it. Maya took out another preliminary reconciliation. There is one more issue, she said. The spreadsheet had only 2 primary columns, what Cipheron should have reported to the trust and what North Shore was actually told. The difference was large enough that I had to read the number again. Approximately $110 million. This is only a preliminary estimate, Maya said. It is based on customer contracts, licensing rates, and Sentinel revenue we can verify. The records North Shore received reflect only a small fraction of that amount. Where did the money go? We don't know yet. I looked at the number again. $110 million in royalties and assets connected to my mother's technology had been diverted while the trust continued sending letters to addresses I did not control. At the end of the table, Torres connected a cable to the wall-mounted screen. Before you trace that money, she said, you need to see this. It is the reason I am here, and it involves more than royalties. The screen lit up. A transaction table. 3 lines. 1 number. 46 millions. This is the technology transfer your family intends to put in your name. Torres did not explain the number in the language of someone trying to impress me. She explained it like someone who had read it so many times that it no longer seemed large. In November of the previous year, a Sentinel deployment package had been transferred to a distributor registered in Singapore. The distributor was hidden behind 3 layers of companies. The ultimate owner was an entity on the U.S. Department of Commerce Export Restriction List. The contract was worth $46 million. On paper, it was described as a regional banking infrastructure license package. This was never going to stay hidden for long, Torres said. It was always going to be discovered. The only question was whose name would be attached when it was. And my name is attached. The forged certificate in your name was used as one of the transaction approval signatures. She changed the image on the screen. It was added on June 22, exactly 3 weeks before Grant invited you to the island on July 13. Jonah pulled his chair closer to the table and opened his laptop. He placed it in the middle with the screen facing me. I found this 3 days ago, he said. It was in the communications department's shared repository, but my infrastructure team manages the backup area for that repository. I saw your name in the change list and opened the copy stored in the system. He opened it. The folder name was written in unaccented capital letters. After Sophie is charged, it contained 19 files. I opened the files with the most recent modification dates first, because that order often revealed more than the content itself. A completed press release. 2 pages, with a blank space for the date. It began by saying Cipheron's leadership was deeply saddened to confirm information concerning an individual in the founder's family. 3 photographs of me, all taken from my Bellcrest file. In one, I was 10 years old, my hair cut short under the facility's rules, my eyes swollen after my first night there. A 6-page psychological evaluation. The document was backdated, but the doctor who signed it had lost his license to practice in 2016. An employment file described me as a former employee with a grievance against the company. I had never worked a single day for Cipheron. An access log file contained 240 entries, all under my account. I stopped at the log file. Show me the native file, I said, not the printout. Jonah opened it in raw form. Cipheron's old logs contained 6 data fields per line. The current system had only 5. I knew because I had once audited a contractor that used Cipheron's product and had worked directly with this exact format. The 6th field, I said. Cipheron eliminated it in 2019 when the company moved to the new logging standard. Jonah studied the screen for about 10 seconds. That's right, he said. Then these 240 lines were not generated by the current system. They were built from an old template that predates 2019. No one in the room said anything. I kept opening files. A $600 million civil complaint seeking damages for disclosure of trade secrets. A template motion to freeze the defendant's personal accounts during the litigation, already filled in with my account numbers at 2 banks. An interview schedule. 4 appearances on 3 networks, with notes on duration. Interview subject. Sophie Mercer. A timed release schedule. The complaint would be filed 45 minutes after the bell ceremony. The press release would go out 20 minutes later. Lauren's first interview was scheduled before noon. They had not prepared the documents in case something happened. They had selected the exact moment to sacrifice me, immediately after the IPO closed. And there was a file named Remarks GM. It was a script. Bullet points marked exactly where he should pause, and 1 line appeared in parentheses. Pause here for 4 seconds before continuing. My father had a script for playing a grieving parent, and the script specified exactly how many seconds he should remain silent. The last file was an internal email thread. Lauren had written to the head of communications 11 days earlier. She has been known as dangerous since she was 10. No one will believe her. I read the sentence and understood what I had been seeing incorrectly all night. I had thought they dug up my past because they needed something to use, and that past happened to be available. But the accusation from when I was 10 had never been abandoned. They had kept it active for 27 years, so they could use it again whenever necessary. I was not the child they had harmed and then left behind. I was the person they had prepared to take the blame for them. Torres closed her notebook. Sophie, I have to give you an option, she said. We can take you to a temporary protective location tonight. During that time, my team will authenticate the records and notify the appropriate agencies that the evidence bearing your name is disputed. You will not have to face this accusation package alone when they submit it. For how long? 4 months. Possibly longer. And while I'm gone, who tells this story? Torres did not answer. He does, I said. He will have a 2-page press release, 4 interviews, and a script with marked pauses. I will be absent. That is exactly what happened when I was 10. I was removed from the room and the story remained in the room. I pushed the laptop back toward Jonah, without taking my eyes off the forged log file. The 6th field. The format abandoned in 2019. The fact that they used a format obsolete since that year did not prove the plan began then, but it gave me a reason to look. I don't want only to prove this document is false, I said. I want to know when they started building it. I slept for 4 hours on a sofa in that conference room and woke at 5:26. Not because of an alarm. My phone vibrated repeatedly. 4 system alerts were waiting on the screen. I sat up, turned on the table lamp, and read them in order. 5:02 a.m. Pacific Time. My work account had been placed in suspended status. 5:03. My building access badge in DC had been disabled. 5:11. An email from my company's security department stating that my federal access was under review by the sponsoring agency and that during the review, I was prohibited from participating in any matter involving restricted information. In my line of work, losing access meant that nearly every important case was taken out of my hands. 70% of the matters I handled involved federal contractors. 5:24. An email from my company's chief executive. She wrote that the company had received a conflict of interest complaint concerning me, that it was obligated to review the matter independently, and that I was being placed on paid administrative leave effective that day. She added one sentence at the end, and I knew she must have thought about it for a long time before writing it. Sophie, I hope this is resolved quickly. I opened the complaint. It had been sent by a Seattle law firm, Cipheron's outside counsel. It did not accuse me of anything. It merely stated that an ongoing personal dispute existed between me and the founder's family, that Cipheron supplied technology to many of my company's clients, and that the firm respectfully requested that my employer conduct an independent review. Not one accusation. Only a question mark placed in exactly the right location by someone who knew that, in this industry, a question mark was enough. Then I saw the article. It appeared in an industry newsletter read by only a few thousand people in the field. The community was small enough that an accurate description would allow most readers to guess who it concerned. The headline referred to an internal review at Cipheron before the IPO. 3 sentences described an unnamed outside investigator related to senior management who was currently being reviewed by her employer for a conflict of interest. My name did not appear. In a professional community that small, it did not need to. I checked the publication timestamp, 2:12 a.m. Eastern Time. I stared at that time for a long while. 2:12 a.m. Eastern was 11:12 p.m. the previous night on the West Coast. My account was suspended at 5:02 a.m. Pacific Time. The article preceded my company's action by almost 6 hours. The person who gave the story to the newsletter was not reacting to something that had already happened. That person knew I would be suspended before my company had made its decision, which meant that person was not standing outside and observing. That person was executing a prepared schedule in which the article had to appear first, so every later action would look like a natural consequence. At 7, Jonah turned on the wall-mounted screen. Lauren sat in a New York studio on a high stool beneath warm lights, with a screen displaying the Cipheron logo behind her. She wore an ivory silk blouse. She spoke for about 4 minutes, mostly about the IPO, infrastructure, and the hospitals and banks that depended on the company's technology. Then the host asked about the family matter. The question was phrased very gently, the kind of question that had been agreed upon in advance. Lauren paused before answering. The way she created the silence matched the instructions in my father's communications package exactly. My sister is a very talented person, Lauren said. We love her. My family has spent years trying to support her. but some people become unstable under pressure, and that is no one's fault. I sat on a sofa in a rented conference room in Anacortes and heard a sentence I had first heard when I was 10. My father had said those exact words to a woman in Bellcrest's admissions office while I sat on a plastic chair in the hallway and listened through a door left slightly open. She becomes unstable under pressure. I had spent 27 years becoming the calmest person in every room I entered, and all 27 of those years had been an argument with a sentence the man who said it did not even remember. I called 3 people that morning. The first was a colleague I had worked with for 9 years. He did not answer. 40 minutes later, he sent a message. "I can't talk to you right now. I'm sorry. You understand?" And I did. He had access of his own, and I knew exactly what he could lose if he called me back. The second was my landlord in Arlington. She said 2 people had been standing in the hallway on my floor since 6 that morning, and one of them had knocked on my door 3 times. The third was my personal attorney. She said the best thing I could do for the next 72 hours was say nothing. I disagreed, and I told her so. "I have the entire record," I told Torres. "The patents, the license agreement, that folder. I can give it to 3 reporters before noon. By afternoon, the story changes." "And by afternoon, your father will know exactly what we have," Torres said. "That package includes a folder only 3 people at Cipheron can access. If you release it, he will need about an hour to identify who gave it to you." I looked at Jonah. He said nothing. He was looking at his phone, and his left hand rested completely still on the table. "Also," Torres said, "if you release it now, Grant will know someone obtained the data and will begin deleting what remains. We are seeking a preservation order. I need that order served before they touch the system." I set my phone on the table. It was the first morning in 12 years of doing this work when I had enough truth in my hands but could not use it yet. At 8:20, Maya entered the room. She held a phone to her ear and did not end the call when she spoke to me. "Sophie, after North Shore issued a notice reserving ownership rights overnight, I was added to the underwriter's change alert list," she said. "I just received a new notice." "What document?" "Last night at 11:47, Cipheron added a document to the filing package." "What document?" "A certification of Sentinel ownership, signed with your electronic signature." The document had been submitted at 11:47 the previous night, 13 minutes before the deadline. I asked Maya for the native version with metadata, not a printout, and opened it on the table immediately. The digital signature in my name appeared on the final page, formally correct and accompanied by a trusted timestamp. Anyone unfamiliar with certificate examination could have believed it. The location field read, Friday Harbor, Washington. By 11:47, I had been off the island on the supply boat for nearly 3 hours. I recorded the contradiction in a separate file and said nothing more about it. In 27 years, I had learned that a single contradiction could be dismissed as a mistake. I needed a chain. A chain could not be explained away so easily. Then I asked Maya for what I actually needed. "Give me the trust's cash flow reports," I said. "All of them, starting in 1999. "That is 2,300 pages," she said. "Good." I worked through them for 2 days in the same conference room, using 3 computers and a whiteboard purchased from the marine supply store downstairs. This was the part of the work no one made movies about. And it was also the only part of the entire situation at which I was better than everyone else in the room. Fraud does not live in one false document. It lives in a repeating pattern hidden among thousands of pages that appear entirely ordinary. Sentinel was licensed to approximately 200 end customers. The money should have traveled a very simple path. The customers paid Cipheron. Cipheron recognized the revenue and then transferred the royalty portion to my mother's trust. The trust held it for the beneficiary. That path had been bent in another direction. Cipheron still collected money from customers and recognized Sentinel revenue, but beginning in March 2003, the portion that should have gone to my mother's trust was instead paid to a Delaware company called Northline Systems Group. Northline held the money for an average of 11 days before transferring it to another entity. On the second transfer, the royalty payable was recorded under a new name. It was no longer a technology royalty. It became a management consulting fee. That was the entire trick. Technology royalties had to be shared with the owner of the technology. Management consulting fees did not have to be shared with the beneficiary. The same money, relabeled. And the beneficiary disappeared from the equation. I traced each payment and counted. 14 companies. 5 registered in Delaware, 3 in Nevada, 3 in Wyoming, 2 in Washington, and 1 in Florida. None had payroll, benefits, or employee operating expense records. 3 companies shared one address, a mailbox in Wilmington. 4 listed the same nominal director, a man named Dennis Kroll. I researched him for 20 minutes and discovered he had been my father's personal accountant since 1997. No company remained active longer than 4 years. Each was formed, used, dissolved, and immediately replaced by a new entity. Rotating companies did not erase transactions. It only divided the trail among more records, more banks, and more jurisdictions. Maya's estimate on the first night had been approximately $110 million. After 2 days of reconciliation, the total I could prove through transactions was $110.3 million over 23 years. I wrote the number on the whiteboard and felt nothing. At that point, it was only a total. What hurt was where the money went. Of the money I could trace, the 5 largest branches led to assets and organizations controlled by my family. $42 million went into a family asset holding company called Mercer Family Holdings. From there, $19 million was used to purchase Cipheron shares in 3 private issuances between 2014 and 2019. The shares were registered to Lauren Mercer, who was 17, 20, and 22 at the time of the 3 issuances. My sister became a major Cipheron shareholder, using royalties from my mother's technology. The position that allowed Lauren to be selected as the future CEO had been purchased with money that belonged to me. $14.8 million was used to purchase a condominium on the 41st floor of a building in Tribeca, New York. The record owner was a company called Halyard Vista LLC. The only person who ever lived there was Lauren. $9.6 million was transferred to a nonprofit called the Victoria Mercer Foundation for the Arts. I read its tax filings. 71% of operating expenses were classified as event costs. That number alone did not prove a crime, but it showed me that the money had been moved into a structure Victoria controlled. $6.2 million was paid to a strategic communications firm in San Francisco. I opened the service descriptions. One item appeared 19 times over 11 years. Founder record management and creative legacy positioning. My father had paid $6.2 million to have someone rewrite who created Sentinel. He paid for it with the creator's royalties. Then I found the line that made me stand up from my chair. In September 2011, Mercer Family Holdings recorded an $8.6 million expenditure. The ledger description contained only 3 words: beneficiary protection expenditure, an expense to protect the beneficiary. I was the sole beneficiary. I had never received a dollar from that trust in my life. I traced the $8.6 million through 3 transfers. It ended at a real estate purchase completed in November 2011, a 4-bedroom house on Lake Chelan, titled to Victoria Mercer. In 2011, I was 22. I was in my final year of college and worked the night shift at a data center from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. I remembered that winter clearly, because I had $19,000 in student loans and had called my father once in 4 years to ask whether he could help with the interest. He said no. He said people became adults only when they paid their own debts. I believed that sentence. I used it to motivate myself for the next 15 years. That same month, he spent $8.6 million in the name of protecting me and used it to buy his wife a lake house. I did not cry. I picked up a pen and did what I knew how to do. I built a 10-foot timeline along the conference room wall. The horizontal axis covered 23 years. I marked every transaction in one color, and above them, marked Sentinel license milestones in another, the execution date, renewal dates, the addition of each major customer, and the 13 electronic acknowledgments in my name. Then I stepped back and saw the pattern. 9 of the 13 forged electronic acknowledgments in my name were issued within 14 days before a major transfer of money. They were not merely notice procedures. They created a record showing that the beneficiary had received the statements and did not object. In the 9 cases I could verify, the false acknowledgement appeared before money was diverted from the royalty stream. That timing pattern did not, by itself, prove Grant ordered the transactions, but it proved the false acknowledgments were part of the transfer mechanism, not random administrative errors. Torres stood beside the board for about 4 minutes without speaking. "You did this in 2 days," she said. "I have been doing this for 12 years. I need it in a form I can put in front of a judge." "I know," I said. "That's why I wrote the transaction number beside every mark." She took out her phone and stepped into the hallway. I heard 4 words before the door closed. "A system, not a dispute." Late on the second afternoon, around 4, I did the final task of the day. I reviewed every bank account appearing in the 2,300 pages, sorted by account holder, to make sure I had not missed an entity. On line 62, there was an account in my name. Not a company, not a trust. A personal escrow account at a bank in Bellevue. Account holder, Sophie Mercer. I opened the account opening file. The requester field and the confirming signature field both contain the same name, my name. The account opening signer was Sophie Mercer, the 14th of June 2001. I was 12 years old and living at Bellcrest. I could not open that account file that same night. The Bellevue Bank had been acquired twice since 2001, and the original account opening documents were stored in the physical archive of the final successor institution. Maya submitted a request at 10 that night. She said 3 days was the fastest possible response. 3 days was too long. But the next morning, Maya entered the conference room at 7 and told me another record had just become eligible to be opened. "Section 11 of the license agreement has a sealed appendix," she said. "I filed the verification request immediately after meeting you. North Shore completed approval for access this morning." Rebecca Mercer had established a secure archive at North Shore Fiduciary Trust in 1998. The internal records called it the Rebecca Archive. The archive could be opened only once during the final 14 days before the 27-year license expired. Access also required North Shore to verify the beneficiary in person and the trust's governing board to approve the request. There were no exceptions, not even for the beneficiary. When Maya came to see me that morning, the Sentinel license had less than 24 hours remaining. The archive was in the basement of a building on 2nd Avenue in Seattle. We entered at 9:15. Torres came with us but remained outside the archive door. She had no right to enter and did not want to create any later dispute over access authority or the chain of custody. A steel table stood in the center of the room. Maya placed on it the metal box she had carried on the first night. It was the same box. North Shore had placed it in Maya's custody when the 14-day window began, but the internal lock remained sealed by the time condition and identity verification requirement. Maya could preserve it. She could not open it. 3 factors were required to open the archive and the box: Maya's credentials, the beneficiary's current biometrics as approved by North Shore that morning, and a time condition checked automatically by the system. I placed my finger on the reader and noticed that my hand was trembling slightly. 3 days earlier, I had refused to place my finger on the black device my father pushed toward me. This was the first device I had touched voluntarily since the night on the island, and I had to remind myself that this system had been left by my mother. The light turned green. The lock on the archive compartment released. The indicator on the metal box changed color as well. Nothing inside the compartment looked like an inheritance. There was an external drive in an aluminum case, with a seal reading, Preservation Copy Source 1999. A packet of original research and assignment records fastened with a brass brad that had turned green, a gray cloth-bound notebook, and a small plastic case holding a CDR with my mother's handwriting on the disc. I opened the metal box first. The founder key was smaller than I expected. It was a metal bar about 7 centimeters long, with a connector on one end, a row of contacts along the body, and a small glass fingerprint reader. Engraved on the body were the words, Rebecca, Mercer 1998. The founder key was not the signing device Grant had placed before me on the island. It was the original hardware key used to prove technical control over Sentinel. It did not light up. There was nothing dramatic about it. It looked like an engineering tool, not a relic. I left it in the box and picked up the notebook. The notebook was about 200 pages long, with writing through page 140. Most of it consisted of formulas and technical notes I could not understand. But in the final 30 pages, the writing changed. It was more widely spaced, and entries were dated. Page 129. The 11th of February 1999. G asked for the third time to transfer the rights into the company's name. I said no for the third time. He did not argue this time, and that worries me more than the first two times. Page 134. March 6. 3 times I left the key in the upper drawer and found it in the lower drawer when I returned. I will not tell anyone. If I speak and I am wrong, I will lose the research team. I am writing this here so that if I am not wrong later, someone will know I saw it. I read that sentence 3 times. My mother had written it because she feared no one would believe her if she spoke. I had spent 12 years helping other people solve that exact problem, without knowing whose work I was continuing. The final written page was dated the 22nd of July 1999, 6 weeks before she died. Sophie asked me today why encryption matters. I told her that there are things people may say about you that you cannot correct, so at least the things you create should be able to prove they are yours. I did not remember that conversation. I was 10 years old, and I did not remember it. But I had built my entire career on that exact sentence. Maya inserted the CDR into an offline read-only device. She created a forensic copy and recorded the hash before opening the file. There was an 11-minute, 40-second video, dated the 31st of July 1999. I pressed play. My mother sat in the research room in front of an ivory CRT computer. She was thinner than she looked in photographs. She wore a gray sweater and held a pen she never used to write, only to keep in her hand. She spoke for 11 minutes, mostly about Sentinel, where it would be used, and the conditions she wanted imposed in the license. She spoke clearly, like someone reading a memorandum. She did not say Grant's name once. Then, at the 8-minute mark, she set down the pen. If you are watching this, she said, someone has tried to turn a right to use into a right to own. She looked directly into the camera. I am not recording this because I think I am about to die. I am recording it because I think someone is about to take something from me. Those are different things, but the preparation is the same. The tears did not come. I had thought hearing my mother's voice again after 27 years would make me cry. What actually happened was that I realized I had forgotten her cadence. I still remembered that her voice was high and slightly rough, but I had forgotten the way it rose at the end of a declarative sentence, as if everything she said were waiting for someone to challenge it. I heard it at the 3-minute mark and knew immediately that I had heard that cadence throughout my childhood. Then, at some point, I had let it fall out of my memory without noticing. That was something they had taken from me that I could never recover. I could trace money. Patents had filing numbers. But I had lost that cadence during some night at Belcrest, and no one could give me back the years in which I no longer remembered it. At the 11-minute mark, my mother did something unusual. She looked down at a paper outside the frame. "One more thing," she said. On the night of June 24, the Building B security system recorded from 10 at night until 2 in the morning. I asked security to preserve the recording, and they told me it had been overwritten under the 30-day cycle. She paused. I did not believe them, so I took a copy myself. The screen went black. I looked at Maya. Then I looked at the aluminum case drive still inside the archive compartment. The camera footage was from the night of June 24. 6 weeks after my mother died, my father accused me of taking the founder key on that very night. My mother's storage medium used a magneto-optical format that disappeared in the early 2000s. It took Jonah 11 hours to read it. North Shore documented the transfer of the storage medium to Torres, recording the seal condition and identification code before it left the archive. She took it to a data recovery lab in Ballard that specialized in obsolete formats. Jonah went with her to identify the data structure. The lab was run by a 70-year-old specialist. Behind his workroom was a storage area filled with equipment capable of reading formats that had vanished decades earlier. The storage medium was mounted on a read-only device. A forensic image was created before recovery began, and the hash of each data region was recorded. Torres remained there for all 11 hours. She said that if the recording had value, every minute it spent outside the chain of custody could later be attacked by opposing counsel. By 9 that night, the recovery equipment had restored 4 data regions. 3 were partially corrupted. The remaining region produced a video file 3 hours and 42 minutes long. We watched it in the conference room with the lights off, and no one spoke. The image was black and white, 10 frames per second, from a camera mounted high in the corner of the research room. The view covered the entrance, the third desk, the server rack, and the file shelf on the right. Through the glass wall outside, part of the hallway remained in frame. The timestamp was burned directly into the upper right corner of the image. 1999年6月24日. Nothing happened during the first 2 hours. A security guard passed through the hallway twice. The lights in the room switched off and then back on automatically. At 23 hours, 41 minutes, and 7 seconds, someone opened the research room door. The person wore a light-colored blazer and carried a document case. The camera captured the face for about 1 second when the person turned to close the door. Victoria. At the time, Victoria was not yet my father's wife. Employment records from 1999 confirmed that she was the operations director for the Sentinel team. She had access to the research room and had worked there for 6 years. Victoria did not search. She walked directly to the third desk from the door, opened the upper drawer, and removed the founder key in 4 seconds. She knew exactly where it was. Then she went to the server rack in the corner, inserted the founder key into the authentication port, and placed a tape cartridge bearing no company label into the reader. She sat down. She remained there for 42 minutes. The camera only showed us Victoria connecting the founder key and storage device to the system. The technical logs revealed what she did. While Rebecca's storage medium was being recovered, Torres's team obtained a forensic copy of Cipheron's 1999 backup tape archive under a court order. The system logs, internal emails, and voicemail data came from that copy, not from my mother's storage medium. Jonah paused the video and opened the authentic system log on his laptop. I checked it against the 1999 backup, he said. Not the forged log in that folder. Cipheron still keeps the tape archive because several government contracts require 30-year retention. He pointed to a line on the screen. During those 42 minutes, there was a data export session, 411 megabytes. The job code confirms this was a complete export of the Sentinel source code repository as it existed in June 1999. Exported where? To an external tape cartridge with no Cipheron asset tag. On the screen, Victoria removed the tape cartridge first, placed it in the document case, and then removed the founder key from the authentication port. She wiped the founder key with the edge of her blazer. Then she did something I will remember for the rest of my life. She walked to the file shelf on the right wall, pulled out a craft paper file pouch, opened it, placed the founder key inside, and closed it. She did it slowly and carefully, like someone wrapping a gift. The camera could not resolve the writing on the pouch at that resolution. But Jonah had found a photograph of the pouch in the internal investigation file created 3 days after that night. 3 handwritten words appeared on the label. Sophie Summer Homework. It was the pouch my mother used to hold my summer math worksheets because I often did them in her office on afternoons when she worked late. Victoria placed the founder key inside a 10-year-old child's homework pouch. 3 days later, security photographed the pouch during an internal inspection. The file was sealed after my mother challenged their conclusion. Only after she died did my father use that same photograph to accuse me formally. At 0 hours 26 minutes and 38 seconds, Victoria left the room. Torres paused the video. She sat silent for about 10 seconds before speaking, and her voice sounded different from every other time that week. Sophie, I need to tell you something. she said. For the first 3 days, I did not believe you. I believed your evidence, but I did not believe you. I have worked in this unit for 16 years, and during that time, I met 4 people who fabricated evidence against their families to obtain an inheritance. I know, I said. You know? At the dock, you asked whether I had signed anything and whether I had touched the device. You did not ask whether I was all right. Torres did not respond to that. She only said, "Show me the emails." Jonah closed the video file and opened the forensic copy from Cipheron's internal 1999 tape archive. 4 emails had been exchanged between 2 internal addresses during the 3 days after June 24. The first, from Victoria to Grant on June 25. Security is creating an incident record. If they notify Redmond police, someone will review the footage. The second, Grant's response 20 minutes later. The tape has been handled. Do not mention it again in writing. The third, from Victoria on June 26. Rebecca does not believe the girl did it. She is questioning security herself. The fourth, from Grant at 11:23 p.m. on June 26. It was 2 sentences long. Let the girl take the blame. She is only 10. No one will believe her. I read those words on a wall-mounted screen in a rented conference room in Anacortes at 10:15 at night, 27 years after they were written. What happened in my mind at that moment was not what I had prepared for. I did not think about my father. I thought about the fact that for 27 years, somewhere very deep inside me where I never reached, I had preserved a small possibility that I might actually have done something. Maybe I had picked up the founder key out of curiosity and forgotten. 10-year-old children could forget. The adults around me had said too many times that they had evidence. I had told myself that if I became more skilled, more precise, and more careful than everyone else in every room, that small possibility would stop mattering. Now, it did not need to stop mattering. It had never been real. I sat there and let the final thing still binding me to that lie disappear. It was much lighter than I had expected. Then, I did what I knew how to do. I asked Jonah to show me the authentic June 1999 access log and placed it beside the 240 forged entries in the "After Sophie is Charged" folder. They matched in one place. Both contained an entry at 23:41 on June 24. In the authentic log, that entry named Victoria Mercer's account. In the forged version, the same timestamp, device code, and session number appeared, but the account name field had been changed to Sophie Mercer. I opened the 1999 system user directory. No account existed in my name. The person who constructed the false file had not written the entry from scratch. That person took a real record, changed one field, and preserved everything else. That was the work of someone in a hurry, or someone so confident that no original would ever exist for comparison. "There's one more thing," Jonah said. He opened the internal voicemail archive from the 1999 backup. There was a 20-second voicemail retained by the system on June 30. The associated log confirmed it had been sent from Grant's extension to Victoria's internal voicemail box. The quality was poor. Wind and traffic sounded in the background, but my father's voice was clear. He was discussing the Bellcrest admission file. Once the girl is sent away, no one will be left to argue about what Rebecca left her. Bellcrest Academy was now called Cascade Ridge Preparatory. It stood 14 miles north of Clay Elam at the end of a 2-lane road running through pine forest. I drove. Torres sat in the passenger seat and said nothing during the final 40 minutes, for which I was grateful. I had not returned in 23 years. I had thought seeing the building would be the hardest part. But the building had been painted white, with a new basketball court, a wooden sign, and flower pots. It looked completely ordinary, and that was the hard part. The smell made me stop. The first-floor hallway smelled of industrial floor wax and damp air from the basement, exactly as it had in 1999. You can change paint. You cannot change a ventilation system. The current head of school was Diane Okafor. She had taken the position in 2014 and knew nothing about the earlier period. Torres presented the court order requiring preservation and production of records. I signed an additional authorization allowing the school to release my entire student file. Headmistress Okafor read both pages of the order, then said something I did not expect. "We kept every paper record from the old institution," she said. "I asked 3 times to destroy them, and the board refused 3 times. I am less angry about that now." The archive was in the basement, in the final room of the corridor, with metal shelving and fluorescent lights. My file was in the 11th cardboard box, marked B1999047, about 4 centimeters thick. I sat on the concrete floor, removed every document, arranged them by date, and began with the oldest. The oldest document was the admission application. My father's signature appeared in the lower right corner. Beside it was the date he signed, the 21st of June, 1999. The founder key was taken from my mother's desk drawer at 11:41 on the night of June 24. My father had signed the application to send me away 3 days before the event he later used to accuse me. I kept the paper on my knees for a while and took 3 breaths. Then I continued reading, because in my field, the most shocking document is the one you are most likely to misread. The second document was a payment receipt. 1 year of tuition plus the admission fee had been transferred on June 22 from the account of a company whose name I now recognized, Northline Systems Group. My father had paid to send me away through the same shell company he began using 4 years later to divert my mother's royalties. The third document was the psychological evaluation required before admission. 6 pages, completed on June 18, 3 days before the application was signed. 6 days before the founder key was taken. It described a 10-year-old child as possessive regarding her mother's work, resistant to limits, and at risk of escalating behavior without intervention in a structured environment. The evaluation stated that the author had interviewed me in person for 90 minutes. I had never met that man. I looked at the signature on the final page. Alan Reese, clinical psychologist. I opened my phone and pulled up the photograph of the psychological evaluation in the "After Sophie is Charged" folder, the one Jonah had found in the communications archive, the one written about me at age 37. The same name, the same signature. In his 70s, the handwriting had become shakier, but it was still the same hand. His license to practice had expired in 2016. He had still signed an evaluation of me that year. They had used the same man twice, 27 years apart, to say the same thing about me. I had thought I was dealing with a new plan built over an old wound. I was not. I was dealing with the same file being reopened. The fourth document was a 1-page typed guardian instruction letter signed by my father. Students were prohibited from using telephones during the first 6 months, without exception. All outgoing correspondence had to be routed through the guardian's office for review before leaving the institution. The approved contact list contained one name, Grant Mercer. No attorney. No relative from my mother's family. No one. At the bottom of the page, a classification box had been checked. Risk of unauthorized departure apply heightened supervision and campus departure prevention measures under safety protocol. In the incident reports behind it, staff described holding both of my wrists as departure prevention under guardian instruction. I sat on that concrete floor and understood why I had not allowed anyone to hold my wrists for 27 years. I had never run away from home. Not once. But I had been labeled a flight risk before I ever arrived at Bellcrest, and that checked box had been used to justify adults holding my arms every time I walked toward a door. Torres bent down and read the line over my shoulder. She said nothing. She photographed it and recorded the box number, page number, and time of capture. We remained there for 4 hours. Near 4 in the afternoon, Headmistress Okafor returned, and she was not alone. The woman with her was about 72 or 73, small, wearing a blue fleece jacket. She worked part-time in the new school's health office 2 days a week. She looked at me for about 3 seconds, then said my name before anyone could introduce us. "Sophie Mercer," she said. "Bed 14, East Wing." I remembered her. Not her name. But I remembered a woman giving me a cold cloth and sitting at the foot of my bed one night during my first month. She had not spoken. She had only sat there. Elise Warren had worked as a nurse at Belcrest from 1994 through 2009. I remember you because you were the only child in the East Wing who did not sleep during the entire first week, she said. You arrived about 6 weeks after burying your mother. I worked in many institutions like this, and I know what a child with behavioral problems looks like. She looked at me. You were not that child. You were the child who sat with her back straight and asked permission before standing. Did you tell anyone? Twice. I was told the guardian had provided complete documentation and that I was a nurse, not a social worker. She paused. I could have made more noise. I did not. I had 2 children and needed the job. I am saying that because I think you should know I made that choice. Then she placed a clear plastic bag on the table. Inside was a piece of graph paper folded into quarters, covered in a child's pencil handwriting. Dear Dad, I did not take the key. Please check the camera beside Mom's door. It recorded everything. I will be good. I want to come home. I remembered writing it. I remembered placing it in the outgoing mail tray in the first floor hallway. I took it from the tray, Elise said, because I had seen what they did with the letters in that tray. I kept it for 27 years and did not know why I was keeping it. My father never answered me. Now I knew it was because he had never received the letter. And I knew something else. Even if he had received it, he already knew what the camera showed. Elise produced a second plastic bag. Inside was an old envelope with worn corners. It had a stamp, a postmark, and a line of red ink stamped diagonally across the front. Return to sender addressee not at this facility. This letter arrived before you were admitted, Elise said. The administrative office stamped it return to sender and placed it in the outgoing tray. I saw your name and removed it before the afternoon mail run. Torres put on gloves, documented the condition of both items, and completed a receipt. She asked Elise to describe separately how she obtained each letter and sign a statement confirming her account. The recipient line bore my name and the address of Belcrest Academy. The return address was written in the hand I had just seen in the Sentinel patent records. The lower loop of the B was open. Postmark. The 30th of August, 1999. Only days before my mother died and nearly 7 weeks before I first set foot at Belcrest. That envelope never reached me because when it arrived at Belcrest, I was not yet at Belcrest. Elise explained it in 3 sentences. The letter reached the institution's mailroom on September 2. Staff checked the student list, did not find my name, stamped it return to sender, and placed the envelope in the outgoing tray. It was the same tray from which Elise removed my graph paper letter almost 2 months later. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note, 9 lines long. My Sophie, I know you will be sent to that place next month. I tried to stop it, and I have not stopped it yet. If they tell you that you did something you did not do not argue with them, because they will not listen. Just remember that I know you did not do it. I left something for you, and they cannot take it away from you no matter what they say. When you are older, find an office called North Shore. I love you. I am sorry I was too late. I read it in the car in the parking lot, with the door open and the engine off. On September 2, my mother knew I would be sent away the following month. She knew they would use a false accusation to remove me from the house, even though no one had told me anything yet. She wrote to an address I had never visited because it was the only place she knew with certainty I would eventually be taken. She died only days after the letter reached Belcrest. I sat in the car for about 4 minutes. Then I folded the paper along its original creases and handed it to Torres to be documented, copied, and preserved as evidence. It was the hardest thing I did that entire week. At 9 that night, Jonah called from Seattle. He was assisting Torres in reviewing the forensic copy of the Cipheron data produced under the court order. He had just found a collection of Lauren's internal emails and messages spanning from the previous October through mid-June. I read them in chronological order. The first time, I read them as an investigator. The second time, I read them as a sister. In November, Lauren requested the complete Belcrest file and asked whether any psychological evaluation could be reused. In January, she requested 3 photographs and specified the criteria. Pictures from when she first entered the institution. Do not use recent photos. She looks too normal in recent photos. In March, Lauren asked the legal department to prepare template motions to freeze 2 of my bank accounts. In May, she requested a list of every document mentioning Rebecca Mercer. She asked how long it would take to remove my mother's name from presentations, client records, and introductory materials after the IPO. The communications department replied that nothing should be altered before the audit was complete. Lauren wrote back, "Then do it after the IPO. Do not touch it before the IPO." Lauren knew which documents could not yet be removed before the audit. She simply instructed them to wait until after the IPO to delete them. For 3 years, I had defended Lauren with the same sentence. Grant and Victoria raised her inside this lie. She knows nothing else. Then I read the June 16 message sent at 1:14 a.m. to a Cipheron attorney. I need to know one thing, just between us. If Section 11 automatically transfers the rights to her at 11:59 p.m. on August 2, what rights does she currently have to Sentinel revenue? The attorney replied, "A substantial share. She also has the right to demand an accounting of unpaid distributions." Lauren responded 6 minutes later. "She does not need to know what rights she has. We only need the signature before her lawyer has time to explain them." That message made it impossible for me to keep defending Lauren. I had once believed she was only repeating what my father taught her. But Lauren knew what Section 11 said. She knew I held rights in Sentinel, and she knew Cipheron was withholding money that belonged to me. Lauren did not create the lie in 1999. But as an adult who knew the entire truth, she still chose to use it because it benefited her. The next morning, Cipheron announced that the bell ceremony had been postponed because of a review of ownership documentation. The company called it a technical delay. An hour later, Lauren appeared on a morning financial news program. She wore navy. She spoke for 3 minutes about the IPO. Then the host asked about the dispute within the founder's family. Lauren remained silent for 2 seconds. "I'm going to be direct because our investors deserve to know," she said. "My sister made a series of financial demands immediately before the listing date. We consider that coercive conduct and have referred the matter to legal counsel." The host followed up. "Are you saying your sister wants to be paid?" Lauren looked directly into the camera. "She wants money in exchange for silence. I am very sorry to have to say that on the air." I had not contacted Lauren, Grant, or Cipheron once in 6 days. My phone vibrated at 10:41. A message from my father's private number. "I have given you too many chances to resolve this within the family. You have until noon tomorrow to sign. If you do not, I will send the $46 million transaction file to federal authorities and identify you as the approving party. I will not call again. Do not make me send you away a second time." I read that message at 10:41 and sat still for about 2 minutes. Then I did something no one in the room expected. I took out a pen and thanked my father. He had given me until noon the next day. A deadline that short meant his side was under pressure too. A person in control did not need to issue an ultimatum. Grant had set a deadline because he was also running out of time. "The bell ceremony has been postponed," I said, "but the underwriters have given Cipheron only until noon tomorrow to cure the chain of title problem. He just told us the point beyond which he cannot delay." Torres sat at the head of the table. "What are you planning to do?" "I'm going to let him believe I will sign." Maya set down her pen. I pulled the whiteboard closer and explained. I had the video of Victoria taking the founder key, 14 shell companies, and a Bellcrest file signed before the key was taken. But most of that evidence belonged to the past. If this becomes a prolonged family dispute, I said, Grant will use the time to alter records, move assets, and keep control of Cipheron. "Then what do you need?" Maya asked. "I need to record what they choose to do next." If Grant voluntarily submitted a document he knew was false, that could become direct evidence of fraud connected to the IPO. If Lauren knowingly deleted data after receiving a preservation notice, that could become evidence of obstruction. We would not ask them to do anything. We would only record the actions they voluntarily took. I wrote 4 steps on the board. I would tell Grant I agreed to attend the signing. I would let him believe I had lost my job, my reputation, and the attorney beside me. Jonah would not access any additional system outside the scope authorized by the court. Torres would collect audit logs and read-only copies if a judge signed the order. The founder key would authenticate Sentinel's technical origin. The legal records would prove the true ownership. Torres read the board twice. You understand that Jonah cannot create a mirror on his own? I understand. If Jonah monitors the system himself, that could be access beyond his authority, I said. We do it only if an order authorizes collection of the audit logs and creation of a read-only copy. Torres nodded. If the judge approves it, we can have an order tonight. Then I only need to keep Grant believing I surrendered until morning. Maya was the one who objected, and she objected at exactly the right point. I need to say this for my record, she said. At 11:59 p.m. on August 2, the license expires. Sentinel supports products that generate nearly 70% of revenue. Cipheron has 4,200 employees. I am not talking about Grant. I am talking about a 31-year-old engineer in Bellevue who just bought a house. I know. Do you have a plan for those 4,200 people, or only a plan for your father? It was the best question anyone had asked me all week. My goal is not to destroy Cipheron, I said. My goal is to separate the company from the Mercer family. I asked Maya to draft a 90-day transition license for Cipheron. It would become effective only if the board suspended Grant, Victoria, and Lauren's operating authority, transferred oversight to an independent committee, preserved salaries and insurance, and allowed existing customers to continue using Sentinel. Maya studied me for a long time. You want me to draft something that saves that man's company. I want you to draft something that keeps me from becoming him. Torres stood and began making calls. On the fourth call, she said the sentence I had been waiting to hear. I need an on-call judge tonight. One task remained, and it belonged to me. Grant had seen me when I was 10, exhausted and no longer resisting. I had to make him believe he was seeing that again. I opened the email placing me on leave, printed it, and set the page in the middle of the table. He wants to see me lose everything, I said. Let him see exactly that. I opened my father's message and typed one sentence. I will sign. Tell me where you want me to go. 11 minutes after my message, Grant replied, call me at 4:18 Saturday afternoon. If you confirm that you will come to New York, the underwriters will hold the Monday morning listing window. I called at exactly the appointed time. I chose late afternoon. After waiting all day, people were often less patient and more likely to talk too much. There were 3 people in the conference room. I sat at the head of the table with the phone on a small stand, and the speaker on. Torres sat to my right, with recording equipment authorized by the call monitoring order. Maya sat across from me. Jonah was not there. He was in Seattle assisting the forensic team within the scope of the court order. Before I placed the call, Torres slid a sheet of paper toward me. Do not sign or affirm any term. Do not admit conduct. Do not ask leading questions. Let him talk. I read it and folded it. Then I performed the hardest part of the plan. I remembered my first night at Bellcrest, the brown blanket, the smell of floor wax, and the moment I understood that no one was coming to get me. I did not try to fake crying. I held those memories in my mind until the feeling of being abandoned actually returned. Grant had watched me break once. I needed him to believe it was happening again. He answered on the 3rd ring. Sophie. I stayed silent for 2 seconds and let him hear me breathe. Dad, I said, I don't know who else to call. I've been waiting for you to call. They suspended me. My account is locked. My badge is disabled. My federal access is under review. 12 years, and they took all of it away from me in 22 minutes. I paused. People have been standing outside my apartment hallway since this morning. My personal attorney says she cannot continue representing me now that this has become a federal investigation and an IPO dispute. A firm in DC wants $400,000 just to start. I don't have that kind of money. There was a silence. Grant said nothing for 4 seconds. Not because he was thinking. He was allowing me to feel the silence. You did this to yourself, he said. I know. No, I don't think you do. His voice warmed. You have always been this way, Sophie. You take something simple, turn it into a war, and then act surprised when you lose. I tried to tell you this when you were 10. You never listened. I'm listening now. It costs much more now. I'll come, I said. I just want this to stop. I heard him shift in his chair. Good. Then listen while I tell you how we are going to do this. Grant spoke continuously for almost 4 minutes, as if reading from a prepared list. I was to fly to New York Sunday night. Cipheron personnel would meet me at the airport. I had to stay at the hotel selected by the company and appear at the listing venue at 7 Monday morning, August 3. The underwriters would preserve the listing window on the condition that biometric confirmation was completed before 7:30. The company's image team would prepare my clothes and makeup. You will go on stage with Lauren, he said. Communications will give you 3 sentences. You will read those exact 3 sentences. You will say that you went through a difficult period, that the family has been patient with you, and that you support your sister as CEO. He paused. Then you put your finger on the device. 4 seconds. Done. In front of the cameras? In front of everyone. You turned a family matter into a public matter. Now you have to end it publicly. Torres wrote 1 word on a sheet of paper and slid it toward me. Attorney? Am I allowed to bring my attorney? No. Dad, only so she can read. Sophie, if an attorney is in the room, nothing gets signed. The $46 million transaction file will be sent to federal authorities with your name as the approving party. You choose. All right. Say it back to me. I will come alone. There was movement on the other end. Then Lauren took the phone. Can you hear me? Yes. After you sign, you do not contact the family again. No calls, no emails. You sign, you are left alone, and you disappear from our lives. All right. You agreed too quickly. Lauren, what do you want me to say? She was silent. I don't know, Lauren said, then handed the phone back. Sophie, my father said. One more thing. Yes. I don't like having to do this. You are my daughter. But 4,200 people are depending on Monday. I cannot let one person destroy their future, even you. Less than 2 days later, I would use that same responsibility to 4,200 people to force the board to suspend his authority. I understand, I said. Good. 7 in the morning. Don't be late. Grant paused. When he said the final sentence, his voice was softer than at any other point in the call. This time, don't make me send you away again. The supplemental preservation and forensic collection order was signed by an on-call judge at 11:52 Saturday night. The order was extremely narrow. It did not permit Torres to enter the building or read communications outside the approved list. It authorized only baseline images of 8 named systems and the recording of all later changes in an independent evidence repository. That repository was append only. No one at Cipheron could alter or delete data after it entered the repository. Jonah Blake was designated to implement the preservation inside the company. Torres called him at 12:10 and read the limitations twice. Jonah could not copy data to a personal device. He could not review content outside the order's scope. He could not independently alter production systems or prevent Cipheron employees from doing their jobs. We did not block the systems. We created an independent record preserving every change. If someone tried to alter or delete data, the evidence repository would retain the original content, the account issuing the command, the time of the action, and its result. Jonah entered the building at 7 Sunday morning, 1 day before the anticipated listing window. He told me this part later because I was not there. The 14th floor had been crowded since 6. Communications had erected 3 backdrops in the hallway. Someone brought in pastries. A printed sheet marked D1 was taped to the glass door of the large conference room. Grant called Jonah into his private office at 7:40. He handed Jonah a printed list of 6 tasks rather than sending it by email. Remove Rebecca Mercer's name from Sentinel metadata, development history, and technical documentation. Consolidate all pre-2005 access logs into a single archive file. Change the timestamps in the $46 million transaction package, being prepared for the underwriters. Activate the account in Sophie Mercer's name and create records showing that the account had approved the transaction earlier. Move the Bellcrest documents and communications working files into a restricted folder. Prepare and test the biometric signing system in New York before 6 that evening. Jonah read the entire list, then asked, "Do you want me to record these tasks in the internal work ticket system?" "No." "Then I need written confirmation that I was instructed to bypass change control procedures. If the auditors ask, I need a basis." That was the sentence of a man who had spent 24 years at one company and knew exactly what loyalty was supposed to sound like. Grant wrote one line on the page and signed beneath it. Jonah placed it on the approved evidence scanner. A hashed scan went directly into Torres's repository. The original was sealed in a preservation envelope and secured at the location specified in the order. Jonah then accepted all 6 tasks but completed no change that could corrupt the data. He performed only the mandatory validation steps and kept every task in pending status. The log consolidation required an integrity check first. If the archive failed, Cipheron could lose 30 years of data and violate government contracts. That check required 4 hours. The partition containing the $46 million transaction file remained locked by the independent auditor until noon. Jonah could not alter it before the lock was released. The account in my name returned a conflict, because a duplicate record already existed. He reported that the matter required manual review. Every reason Jonah gave was technically true. As a result, Grant did not realize Jonah was keeping the tasks pending without changing a single byte of data. Meanwhile, Jonah configured preservation for the 8 systems exactly as the order required. The baseline images and every changelog were transferred to the append-only evidence repository. At 3 in the afternoon, Lauren came down to the 14th floor. She did not approach Jonah's desk. Lauren stopped at the workstation of an infrastructure administrator named Aaron Walsh. "Has there been any large copying task today?" Aaron answered that a pre-event preservation job had been initiated by the Director of Systems Architecture at 9:20. Lauren asked nothing further. 40 minutes later, Jonah was ordered to appear in a 16th floor conference room at 4:30 with his company phone and laptop for a pre-listing compliance review. Before leaving his desk, he confirmed that the forensic images and changelogs had reached Torres's repository. He logged out of every session, deleted no history, and left the pending tasks untouched. Then, Jonah checked the monitoring screen one final time. A new task had been created at 2:11 that afternoon. It did not originate from his account or any infrastructure administrator's account. The task had been created by a high-level automated account whose credentials were stored in the privileged vault. Only 3 Cipheron executives had authority to request that the vault be opened. The process was named CLEANROOM. Jonah opened its definition. It was an 11-step sequence. It would delete the historical code repository, pre-2005 access logs, the communications partition, tape images, snapshots, and the listed internal backups. It would then revoke the encryption keys, rendering the remaining copies unreadable. CLEANROOM could not reach the evidence already held by Torres, North Shore, or Bellcrest, but it could erase every remaining original and comparison trail inside Cipheron. Jonah checked the trigger condition. The task was not scheduled by time. It was waiting for a status code indicating that the New York biometric signing session had been completed. The moment my finger left the glass, CLEANROOM would begin erasing every remaining trace inside Cipheron. I flew to New York on a Sunday morning flight, alone, exactly as I had promised my father. Torres and Maya took a different flight. We did not appear together. Cipheron personnel met me at the airport and took me to a hotel in Midtown. The rehearsal had been moved to 9 that evening. Before we separated, Torres gave me a small alarm device and established an emergency phrase in case Grant tried to detain me. At 7:22 p.m. New York time, Torres forwarded 4 lines Jonah had sent through the forensic channel from Seattle. He described CLEANROOM and its trigger condition. The final line read, "If I do not confirm before 7, assume my access has been locked and I no longer control the preservation session." Jonah sent nothing else. The evidence repository continued receiving logs from the 8 systems, and the CLEANROOM definition had been preserved intact. We lost contact with Jonah. We did not lose the evidence. That discovery changed the plan. I could approach the device the next morning, but I could not allow the system to report that the signing session had been completed. I needed the underwriters to stop the process themselves before Grant knew I had found the deletion trigger. The rehearsal and listing readiness review took place in the fourth-floor ballroom. Senior management, the board, the underwriters, transaction counsel, auditors, and communication staff were present. A transaction secretary kept the record. I arrived at 5 minutes before 9, wearing the outfit Cipheron's image team had sent to the hotel. I only needed them to believe I had been defeated for one more night. Grant placed a hand on my shoulder in front of the underwriter's representative. "This is Sophie, my oldest daughter." It was the first time in 27 years that he had introduced me that way. Lauren opened the rehearsal. When she reached the section on difficult questions, she mentioned me before anyone asked. "If the press asks about my sister, we answer directly," she said. "Sophie has a difficult history. She caused the company's first security incident when she was a child. My family has protected her for 27 years. Tomorrow morning, she will help us put the matter behind us." There was scattered applause. I did not object. Near the end, Daniel Kessler, the attorney leading the underwriter's legal review, stood up. "I need to ask Miss Mercer one question for the record. Do you confirm that Cipheron owns all rights to Sentinel?" "I have been asked to sign a confirmation tomorrow morning," I said. I sat down. I did not answer yes or no. I stated the only truth that did not compromise the plan. Cipheron still needed my signature. The room was silent for about 4 seconds. Kessler looked down at the packet. "Mr. Mercer, the filing submitted at 11:47 on the night Miss Mercer left Friday Harbor already bore her electronic signature. If ownership had been confirmed, why is an in-person confirmation still required tomorrow?" "Because your side required it," Grant said. "We required it because we identified a gap in the chain of title," Kessler replied. "I am asking why that document existed before the gap was resolved." He turned to the next appendix. Appendix 11 states that the commercial license for Sentinel expires at 11:59 p.m. on August 2. Why does this not appear in the risk disclosures? Grant stepped forward half a pace. "It is an old succession mechanism. Legal will explain it before the market opens." "I need the original agreement," Kessler said, "not a summary." The silver-haired woman in the front row turned toward Grant. She was chair of the audit committee. "I have served on this board for 9 years, she said. "This is the first time I have heard the word expires used in connection with Sentinel. I want that agreement on the table tonight." Lauren stepped to the microphone. She said all documents would be provided and suggested ending the meeting because it was nearly 10. The room cleared in 10 minutes. Kessler did not leave. He remained in the front row, opened the packet, and made a call. I went into the rear hallway to retrieve my coat. My father was standing there. Behind him was the service corridor leading to the employee elevators. Grant stood between it and me. He reached out and closed the wooden door leading into the ballroom. Then he turned the lock. A small microphone was hidden in a button of my gray coat, transferred to me by Torres under a written chain of custody record at 4 that afternoon. She had confirmed recording authority with the prosecutor in charge. I signed an acknowledgement that I knew the device was active and consented to record every conversation in which I directly participated. The microphone transmitted to a secure phone in my coat pocket. The phone sent the audio over an encrypted connection to Torres in room 11, 14 of the hotel across the street. The alarm button remained beneath the edge of my sleeve. Torres would intervene only if I activated it or the audio signal stopped. My father turned the lock and stood there with his hand still on the latch. "What did you just do in there?" I answered a question. "You know exactly what you did." His voice did not rise. It lowered and became flat. "You have spent your entire life trying to destroy this," he said. "Do you know who your mother built Sentinel for? The hospitals and systems that depend on it. She died and left technology that could not operate outside a research lab. I spent 27 years turning it into a real product. Mom is the principal inventor on all 18 patent families," I said. "But you erased her name from Cipheron's history. I kept her technology alive. You spent $6.2 million on strategic communications to rewrite the founder history. That was not protecting Mom's legacy. That was buying a different story." He did not ask how I knew the number. Listen to me, Grant said. Tomorrow morning, one of two things will happen. You put your finger on the device and leave. Within 6 months, I use my relationships to help restore your access. Or by noon, the $46 million transaction file will be on a federal prosecutor's desk. Your digital certificate appears in 3 places. He spoke as if he were reading a weather report. They will question you, freeze your accounts, and force you to burn through every dollar you have left on lawyers. Then you will have to ask for appointed counsel and the psychological evaluation. He replied. He did not pause to consider whether he should admit that. The file from when you were 10 says you were at risk of escalating behavior. Lauren repeated that story in front of the entire room tonight, and no one objected. That file has followed you since you were 10. It will follow you until you are 50. I stayed silent for 3 seconds. Then I asked the question I had carried for 27 years. Dad, I am going to ask this once. The camera in Mom's research room recorded the night of the 24th of June, 1999. I wrote from Bellcrest and asked you to check the camera beside her door. Why didn't you look? Grant answered immediately, in the tone of someone explaining the obvious, because it did not matter. What did not matter? The recording. He gave a slight shrug. Truth matters less than the story people are willing to believe. The creator of the technology had just died, and the board was asking who controlled Sentinel. I needed an answer that week. Not the correct answer? An answer that made them nod. You knew it wasn't me. I knew that did not change anything. I had known he knew since the night in Anacortes, when I watched the video and read the 1,999 emails. But hearing him say it made every sound in the hallway seem to recede. Grant did not understand why I had asked. At 10, I had comforted myself with the belief that he had never viewed the footage, because if he had seen it, my father would surely have come to get me. I had lived for 27 years with that belief. The door behind Grant opened. Lauren entered the hallway with her phone still in her hand. She looked first at my father, then at the distance between him and me. Dad, Lauren said. Not now. I'm speaking to my daughter. She has to be on stage in 9 hours. If she has a mark on her hand tomorrow morning, I will have to answer questions from the press. Lauren turned to me. Go back to the hotel. The car will pick you up at 6:15. Lauren, Grant said. Dad, it is only until tomorrow morning. She lowered her voice. Once the signing session is complete and the filing is submitted, we do not have to do anything ourselves. Let the system handle Sophie. That is the entire point of the plan. Do not do it by hand in a hallway. Let the system handle Sophie. My sister said those words less than 2 meters from the microphone in my coat button. Grant removed his hand from the latch. He unlocked and opened the door for me, politely, as if nothing had happened. I walked past him. Grant called my name. I turned around, and that was his final mistake that night. After you sign, you will never have another chance to speak to anyone. I reached room 1114 at 11:20 that night. Torres had heard everything. She went directly to the final 30 seconds and replayed Lauren's sentence 4 times. Let the system handle Sophie. That is the strongest direct statement I have from Lauren, she said. But defense counsel can still argue that your sister was referring to the legal process. What do you need? I need one of them to directly alter, delete, or order the destruction of data under preservation. The court order was served on Cipheron's legal department at 9 Sunday morning Pacific time. Jonah activated preservation 20 minutes later. From the moment the order was received, Cipheron was prohibited from deleting, overwriting, or causing the loss of data in the 8 named systems. Normal operations could continue as long as every change was preserved. Jonah had been silent for more than 4 hours. His message arrived at 11:43 New York time from Aaron Walsh's phone number. Jonah told us the rest later. Torres matched his account against the system logs and Aaron's statement. The 16th floor review included the head of internal security, a Cipheron attorney, and Lauren. Lauren placed the preservation task record on the table. She had highlighted the line showing that data was being transferred to an address outside Cipheron's data center. You are copying company data to a system the company does not own, Lauren said. Jonah explained that he was executing a court-ordered preservation and forensic collection process. He was the designated implementer, and the legal department had received the order before the task began. The Cipheron attorney left the room to make a call. Lauren ordered Jonah's building badge and company devices collected. She took him to the operations room to complete the handoff. Then Lauren asked, "Is the preservation stream one-way only, or can investigators send commands back into the system?" Jonah replied that he was not authorized to disclose technical details outside the presence of the investigating agency. Lauren remained silent for about half a minute. Then, she used her executive authority to request access to the privileged credential vault. After the second authentication step, Lauren accessed CLEANROOM. She did not cancel the process. She changed the trigger condition. The biometric completion signal was removed. Instead, CLEANROOM was scheduled to run at 9:29 a.m. Eastern Time. In Seattle, that was 6:29 a.m. The bell ceremony was scheduled to begin 1 minute later. Lauren made the change after Cipheron had formally received the preservation order. Torres's evidence repository recorded the account that requested access to the privileged vault, the authentication time, and every change to CLEANROOM. Lauren then suspended Jonah and ordered him to wait in the conference room for the handoff. A security employee stood outside the door. Erin passed through the hallway and gave Jonah her personal phone for a few seconds. He sent one message. "They know. CLEANROOM will run at 9:29 Eastern." Torres stood and called the on-duty assistant U.S. attorney. The first option was to seek an emergency search and seizure warrant. The Seattle team would enter headquarters at 4 a.m. Pacific Time, assume administrative control of the 8 systems, lock the credential vault, and create complete forensic images before 6:29. "That is the safe option," Torres said. "We already have the recovered video, the North Shore records, the Bellcrest file, 14 shell companies, and the $46 million transaction data. The case against Grant remains very strong." What about Lauren? Her change to the trigger condition is already direct evidence. But a lawyer can argue it was only a maintenance, scheduling change, and that Lauren never intended the process to execute. What is the other option? We allow CLEANROOM to enter execution status. The system will record the final approver and launch command. The technical team will stop it with 7 seconds remaining before the first deletion step. Torres looked directly at me. No data is allowed to be deleted. But if the blocking layer fails, the remaining internal originals will be at risk. I stood by the window. The building across the street was testing its display. The Cipheron logo appeared, followed by Lauren's face and a countdown. Stopping immediately would protect the entire system. Continuing could capture Lauren's final act of approval. I had read her emails and messages from October through June. I knew Lauren would say she had only followed Grant's instructions, unless there was a final action in her own name. "I am still prepared to go on stage," I said. "The rest is your decision and the prosecutor's." Torres called the assistant U.S. attorney again. After nearly 20 minutes, the plan was approved to continue on the condition that the technical team had full authority to stop CLEANROOM before the first deletion step. At 1:17 in the morning, my phone vibrated. The messages still came from Erin's number. They were 2 short sentences sent 3 seconds apart. Jonah had no time to explain further. "I may have lost access. I am not sure I can still open the CLEANROOM console from inside Cipheron." In the 48 hours before the bell, 4 things had been put into place. I saw them only during the final 6 hours. The first appeared at 1:50 in the morning, when Torres received a call and stepped into the hallway to take it. She returned, looking as if she had received important information she had not expected. "A federal financial intelligence contact just reported that a Chicago bank filed a suspicious activity report Friday afternoon," she said. "Your father opened a short-term $60 million line of credit, secured by pre-IPO shares, and part of his personal assets. The term is 14 days. What is the money for? On paper, working capital." "No," I said. "A 14-day $60 million loan does not resemble ordinary working capital." Grant needed to prevent a sharp decline during the first trading sessions. If the share price collapsed immediately after the listing, the underwriters, the board, and investors would begin asking why. The loan could be used to support the share price or satisfy an undisclosed short-term obligation. But I did not yet have the cash flow to prove it. There was another, more troubling point. Most of the shares and assets Grant listed as collateral already appeared in another pledge filing whose creditor I had not yet identified. I wrote in my notebook, "There are indications that the same assets secure two obligations." The second thing appeared at 4:12 in the morning. A reporter in D.C. who had called me 4 times that week sent an email with no text. It contained only 3 attachments. They were 3 draft Cipheron press releases distributed in advance to newsrooms. The first was scheduled for release at 9:35. Cipheron completes listing and board appoints Sophie Mercer as Chief Executive Officer. The second was scheduled for 10 and concerned Grant's legacy, accompanied by 4 photographs of him in a Redmond garage in 1996. The third was held for 10:35, conditioned on the legal department confirming that the file against me had been submitted at 10:15. Its headline read, "Cipheron confirms full cooperation with federal investigators concerning a member of the founder's family." My name appeared in the second paragraph. My age, my profession, and 1 sentence about the time I spent in a structured educational institution as a child. That draft had been sitting in the inboxes of 30 news organizations since Saturday afternoon. They were not preparing to respond to an investigation. They were preparing the investigation and then preparing the story that would be told about it. The third thing arrived at 5:27. My personal attorney forwarded an administrative subpoena from a different cybercrime investigation unit. It demanded all documents, devices, and communications related to the $46 million distribution agreement. I handed it to Torres. She checked the issuing seal. "Not my unit," she said. "Someone submitted a file on Friday, and another unit opened a matter based on it. Can the subpoena detain me?" "No. But if you complete the biometric session, the system may link your current fingerprint to the 3 forged digital certificates in the $46 million file. The other unit may treat you as an active suspect and seek authority to detain or arrest you for questioning." Torres set the document down. "I can provide the video, the patent records, the trust documents, and the founder key to rebut it, but I cannot unilaterally override another unit's decision. You could still be detained while the 2 matters are reconciled." "I understand." "I don't think you do," she said. "If you complete the signing session, both CLEANROOM and the case against you will be activated." By 5 in the morning, the technical team still had not restored internal access to the CLEANROOM console. The plan to stop it with 7 seconds remaining depended on the external control layer. The fourth thing was mine. Maya had completed 2 documents. The first confirmed that Sentinel's commercial license expired at 11:59 p.m. on August 2 and had not been renewed. We had not sent it. Sending it too early would give Cipheron time to turn the issue into a dispute supposedly under resolution. The second proposal was my idea, converted by Maya into legal language. Cipheron would receive a 90-day transition license on 6 conditions. Grant, Victoria, and Lauren would lose all operating authority and privileged access. An independent committee would take control. Employee salaries, insurance, and accrued benefits would remain intact. Customers would continue using Sentinel. The company would cooperate fully with the investigation. And Cipheron would issue a correction restoring Rebecca's name to all current materials while preserving every old version as evidence. Maya's office delivered 3 sealed copies to the hotel at 6:10. 3 minutes later, my phone vibrated. It was an automated message from the event organizer, sent to every guest and member of the press. The change had been submitted by Cipheron's executive office, not by the underwriters. The ownership confirmation session, originally scheduled for a private conference room at 8:40, had been moved to the main stage. The confirmation will occur immediately before the opening bell and will be broadcast live on 4 financial networks and the outdoor screens in Times Square. We had 47 minutes to rewrite the plan. In a private conference room, I would have faced only 12 people. On the main stage, there would be 400 people, 4 live broadcasts, and a device I was not allowed to touch before the signing moment. Torres, Maya, and I settled on 5 steps. Step 1 belonged to me. I would go on stage and not refuse to sign, but I would delay with 2 questions. I needed Grant and Lauren to state publicly that Cipheron owned all of Sentinel and that Rebecca Mercer retained no rights. The original agreement already proves them wrong, I said. But the lie in front of investors is what turns it into securities fraud. Step 2 belonged to Maya. After I asked the questions, she would send the board, Daniel Kessler, and the listing office the notice confirming the license had expired, together with the original agreement and the beneficiary designation. If I send it early, they will pull you off stage, Maya said. You open the door. I walk through. Step 3 was the founder key. It did not shut down Sentinel or freeze the company. When inserted into the authentication port, it proved 4 things cryptographically: the original owner, the person with licensing authority, the source code of origin, and unauthorized changes. It was a certificate, not a weapon. Step 4 was Jonah. He had lost his badge, laptop, and company phone. We had been unable to reach him since 1:17 in the morning. If Jonah cannot open the display feed, the evidence will not appear, Torres said. I will still insert the founder key, I replied. The screens are for the 400 people. The founder key is for the underwriters. Step 5 depended on Lauren. CLEANROOM would enter execution status. At 9:29, the evidence repository would record the approving account and each command. The technical team had to stop it before the first deletion step. Torres reminded me that an arrest would not come from a speech. The case lay in the money flowing through 14 entities: the forged certificates, the export violation, false listing filings, obstruction, and securities fraud. You do not have to prove everything this morning, she said. You only have to let them perform the final step themselves in front of the cameras. I imposed one condition. Sentinel cannot go offline. Not for 1 second. The expiration notice only prevented Cipheron from making new sales, renewals, or transfers of Sentinel. It did not affect systems already operating. Maya added customer protection language to the document. When the elevator arrived, she remained outside. Sophie, after you insert the founder key, you will no longer be the person something was taken from. You will be the person with the power to decide Cipheron's fate in front of 400 people. Then she said the last thing. You will have to choose in public: destroy Cipheron or accept responsibility for saving it. The Cipheron car picked me up at 6:15. I entered the building through the main entrance, signed in, then left through a service corridor, and returned to the hotel across the street. The access records still showed that I had arrived. In room 1114, Maya had hung a dark blue-black suit in the style of the 1990s. It had been found in the North Shore archive with the patent records. The suit had belonged to my mother. Maya had cleaned it and replaced the lining but altered nothing else. When I put it on, the shoulders fit. The sleeves extended 2 centimeters beyond my hands. Why didn't you alter it? I asked. Because I had no authority. The pocket still contained the tailor's label and Rebecca's name written in the same hand I had seen in the patent records. I did not wear it to look stronger. I wore it because, during the next 2 hours, I would tell 400 people that the technology they were buying belonged to someone they had never known. I wanted something of hers on me. I returned to the building at 7:40. The stage was complete. 4 large screens hung behind it. The countdown had not yet begun. Grant stood at the edge of the floor telling the story of the Redmond garage where he claimed to have written the first 30,000 lines of code alone. In that story, Rebecca had never existed. Victoria stood near the reception table. Torres sat in the 7th row. Kessler and the audit committee chair sat in the front row. I looked for Jonah in the control room but did not see him. Lauren saw me at 9:17. She stopped when she recognized the suit. You arrived just in time to bury yourself, she said. At 9:25, the lights dimmed. The clock lit up. 0:05. The biometric device was placed on a small table at center stage. Lauren spoke for 4 minutes. She talked about hospitals, power grids, and the systems that depended on Sentinel. Then she described Grant as the craftsman who had built the company from a garage. Then Lauren mentioned me. She said I had caused Cipheron's first security incident, and that the family had kept it private for 27 years to protect me. Today, she is here voluntarily to help us put that matter behind us. The room applauded. Grant stepped onto the stage and declared, "I created Sentinel in 1996 alone and spent 27 years making sure no one could take it from me." Then he handed me the microphone. "I will sign," I said. The room went silent. But before I place my finger on the device, I need two things stated clearly for the record. Kessler set down his pen. "Dad, do you represent that Cipheron owns all rights to Sentinel?" "Yes." "Do you represent that Dr. Rebecca Mercer retained no ownership rights?" Grant paused for 3 seconds. Then he said, "Rebecca contributed to part of the early work. No one outside Cipheron holds any rights to Sentinel." I turned to Lauren. "Do you agree?" She had read Section 11. She knew the license had expired, but she was standing moments away from being announced as CEO. "Yes," Lauren said. "Your biological mother left no rights behind." I looked out at the 400 people. Does anyone here know who Dr. Rebecca Mercer was? Not one hand went up. The clock read, 0:01:52秒. I reached toward the device. Grant leaned forward. Then I pulled my hand back. "Before I sign," I said, "everyone should see the first piece of evidence." The 4 screens still displayed the Cipheron logo. 3 seconds. 6 seconds. I understood that Jonah had not been able to open the feed. Grant took the microphone. "My daughter has had a difficult week. We will handle the family matter later." He placed a hand on my elbow. Then all 4 screens went dark. 1 second later, the 24th of June 1999 video appeared. Victoria entered the research room, took the founder key, inserted it into the server, and then placed the key inside a file bearing my name. "This is Victoria Mercer," I said. 42 minutes later, she hid the founder key inside the file of a 10-year-old child. The screen changed to the June 26 email. "Let the girl take the blame. She is only 10. No one will listen to her." Grant removed his hand from me. "Fabricated," he said. "Turn off the screens." No one turned them off. The third set of evidence consisted of the patent records naming Rebecca as the principal inventor, the 27-year license agreement, Section 11, and the document designating me as the sole beneficiary. Kessler stood up. "The expiration clause," he said. "The thing they called a formality last night." The final evidence was a folder. After Sophie is charged. Inside were the press release, photographs of me at Bellcrest, the false psychological evaluation, the $600 million lawsuit, the account freeze motion, and Lauren's interview schedule. The final file was Grant's speech script, including the timed pause instructions. Grant shouted that all the data had been stolen and altered. Torres stood, exposing her federal credentials. "This data was obtained under a federal preservation order," she said. "You should be very careful about your next sentence." The clock showed 0:0:0:34. Grant stepped forward, seized my right wrist, and pulled it toward the glass. I did not jerk away. I let him hold my wrist for exactly 1 second, long enough for him to realize that 4 cameras were recording. Grant released me. I opened the metal box, removed the founder key, and inserted it into the authentication port. I placed my finger on the key. 4 seconds. The screen displayed, founding owner, Dr. Rebecca Mercer, beneficiary authority, Sophie E. Mercer, license term, expired 03 Aug. Then, assignment invalid, unauthorized transfer detected, certificate origin mismatch. Kessler said to the audit committee chair, "The chain of title is not clean." Lauren left the stage, went to the secondary control station, and logged in. She opened CLEANROOM, changed the task to execute immediately, and spoke into the headset. "Delete everything, now." The 4 screens instantly displayed the log. Task. CLEANROOM initiated 9 hours 28 minutes and 41 seconds EDT. Initiating account. L. Mercer. Mirror status. Active. Each deletion step appeared together with Lauren's account name. Torres spoke into her radio. "We have the final execution order. After the preservation order, Maya sent the license expiration notice to the board. the underwriters, and the listing office. Kessler walked directly to the exchange representative. The clock counted down from 19 seconds. Then it stopped. 0小时0分07秒. The technical team had blocked CLEANROOM before the first deletion step. The 4 screens changed to IPO suspended, core technology license expired, pending review of disclosure materials. No one applauded. The only sound in the room was hundreds of phones being pulled from pockets. Grant stood 1 meter from me. He did not shout. He spoke only loudly enough for me to hear. You just destroyed 4,200 lives. He had calculated exactly where to place that sentence, and he had miscalculated one detail. He thought I was considering those 4,200 people for the first time. I picked up the microphone before the technical team could cut the audio. Sentinel has not been shut down, I said. Hundreds of people in the room were opening their phones. Within seconds, one of them would write the first line of the news report. Hospitals and infrastructure operators are still using Sentinel. No system has been disconnected. The Rebecca Mercer Trust will not seek suspension of use rights for 48 hours, while the board considers a transition license. I looked toward the Cipheron employees. Anyone with worried customers should call them right now. Several people stood with phones pressed to their ears. That was the signal I needed. I took out the 3 sealed copies Maya's office had delivered to the hotel that morning. This is an offer of a 90-day transition license to Cipheron Systems. The offer will remain open for 48 hours. I read the 6 conditions. Grant and Lauren would be suspended from all operating authority. Victoria would be barred from access to systems and documents related to Sentinel. An independent transition committee would take control, including a representative selected by employees. Employee pay, insurance, and accrued benefits would remain intact. No customer would experience an interruption. Cipheron would cooperate fully with the investigation and preserve all data. I read the final condition more slowly. Cipheron must publish a correction identifying Dr. Rebecca Mercer as the principal inventor on all 18 patent families, and restore her name to every technical document, product document, and company history record currently in use. All prior versions must be preserved as evidence. I placed the 3 copies on the table beside the authentication port. Not in a memorial post, I said. In the documents. The entire room was silent. The Rebecca Mercer Trust controls the right to license Sentinel. Cipheron may accept these conditions or stop using the technology when the 48-hour period ends. The audit committee chair stepped forward, took 1 copy, and turned toward the other 5 independent directors. They met on the floor for 11 minutes. The 6 of them had just seen Cipheron submit a listing package with a defective chain of title. Every minute Grant and Lauren remained in control was another minute the board increased its own exposure. I had not given them a good option. I had given them the only way out. While the board deliberated, Torres approached Lauren. The log had just captured CLEANROOM's final execution command, confirmed through Lauren's privileged authority at 9 hours 28 minutes and 41 seconds. Torres informed Lauren that she was under arrest pursuant to a federal warrant related to obstruction and conspiracy to commit securities fraud. Then she read Lauren her rights. Lauren did not respond. She turned to look for Grant. He did not look at Lauren. He was trying to hear what the board was saying about his position. 4 minutes later, 2 financial investigation agents approached Grant with an arrest warrant signed by a judge. The warrant was based on the $46 million distribution agreement, 3 layers of intermediary entities, and the ultimate owner on the Department of Commerce export restriction list. Grant said only one thing to Kessler. "You are destroying a company over a family dispute." Kessler did not answer. At 9:54, the 6 independent directors adopted an emergency resolution. Grant and Lauren lost all operating authority and access. Victoria was barred from the systems. Independent counsel was given authority to supervise the transition. A formal meeting was called for 10:30 to consider the 90-day license. No one had yet signed the license on the stage. I removed the founder key from the authentication port, returned it to North Shore's metal box, and locked the box. There was still one person I had to find. Victoria had disappeared. A service employee confirmed she left through the west door at 9:42. Hallway footage showed Victoria removing a small black object from Grant's coat shortly beforehand. Torres sent the image to the financial investigation team and to Customs and Border Protection at Teterboro. A chartered flight scheduled to depart at 11:15 for Grand Cayman had been booked under the name of an entity from my cash flow chart. Torres handed me her phone. Victoria is on her way to Teterboro with a device believed to be a hardware wallet that may control digital asset addresses worth approximately $18 million. The $18 million figure did not come from me. The estimate came from a digital asset tracing unit and was based on 4 wallet addresses preliminarily linked to Mercer Family Holdings. I read the message at 10:03 that morning and immediately knew something did not fit. But at 10:15, I had to go to the 10th floor. The first thing I did after Cipheron's transaction was suspended was not celebrate. I sat with the 6 independent directors and worked to make sure 4,200 employees still had jobs the next day. The formal meeting began at 10:30. Grant was excluded from voting because of the conflict of interest and the ongoing investigation. Independent counsel had been retained by the audit committee the night before. The board adopted 5 resolutions, each by 6 votes. Grant was removed as executive chairman, suspended from all administrative authority, and asked to resign from the board. Lauren's every role at Cipheron was terminated. Victoria was barred from access to systems, board materials, and all decisions involving Sentinel. The transfer agent was instructed to suspend transactions in Cipheron shares linked to the 14 entities, while investigators sought a formal freeze order. A comprehensive independent audit was opened. The final resolution took the longest. The board had to acknowledge that the 27-year commercial license expired at 11:59 p.m. on August 2, that control of Sentinel had reverted to the Rebecca Mercer Trust, and that Cipheron required a new license to continue operating. Company counsel wanted language-preserving room to argue. Independent counsel rejected every ambiguous phrase. They argued for nearly 40 minutes. I sat quietly because it was the first time in 27 years that people were arguing to put my mother's name into a document rather than remove it. Near 11:20, the audit committee chair invited me to serve as interim CEO. I declined. If I accepted, Cipheron would still be controlled by someone named Mercer. Only the story would have changed. I did not want to replace one family dynasty with another, even if I occupied the center this time. I proposed 3 things. An outside interim CEO selected by the board after consultation with independent counsel and the underwriters. An employee-elected representative on the restructuring committee, with access to documents not protected by legal privilege or a confidential investigation. And Jonah Blake, to oversee technical continuity for 30 days under independent supervision, without access to evidence systems. The committee chair asked where Jonah was. As far as I knew, he remained in the 14th floor operations room at Bellevue headquarters under legal's handoff instruction. They found Jonah at 8:22 that morning in Bellevue. The door was not locked. He could have left, but Cipheron would have characterized that as refusal to complete the process and used it to attack the preservation work. Jonah had been there for nearly 16 hours. He had lost administrative privileges but still had a read-only monitoring session open from earlier. The feed that placed the 4 pieces of evidence on the New York screens had been configured before his suspension, using architecture Rebecca designed and Jonah maintained through multiple upgrades. I called him at 11:30. "I stayed silent for 15 years, Jonah said. "Are you sure you want me keeping the system?" "I do not forgive you for those 15 years, I replied. "But you are the only person who understands Sentinel well enough to stabilize it and remove the unauthorized control mechanisms without interrupting customers." Jonah accepted. The final matter was the 90-day transition license. The board accepted the 6 conditions. I signed under the trust's authority. The audit committee chair signed for Cipheron. I read every word again before signing because I had seen what happened when people signed something they had not read. The license took effect at the beginning of August 3. No customer was interrupted. No system had to stop operating. That was the only thing all week I allowed myself to feel proud of. I left the building near 1 in the afternoon. At 4:20, while I was at LaGuardia Airport, the audit committee chair called. Within the first 4 hours, the audit team had found the credit agreement, the maturity schedule, and the collateral appendix. It took another 10 days for us to reconstruct the entire cash flow. Grant had borrowed $300 million on January 22. The debt matured on October 22. It predated the $60 million Chicago line. The new line reused part of the collateral without fully disclosing the first creditor's priority rights. $300 million, due in less than 12 weeks. If the IPO failed, Grant would lose his refinancing path and he had no unencumbered assets left to meet a collateral call. The $300 million debt was the real reason Grant needed 4 seconds of my fingerprint. Over the next 10 days, I worked with 2 auditors and a financial investigator on Torres's team to reconstruct the cash flow. On January 22, Grant borrowed $300 million from a private credit fund in Connecticut, secured by Cipheron shares valued at the expected IPO price. The loan matured on October 22. The money did not go into the company. $110 million repaid a 2021 loan. $94 million repurchased shares from 2 investors who wanted out before the IPO. The remaining $96 million went into 4 accounts within the 14-entity network. If the IPO closed, Grant's shares would have a market price, and the debt would become eligible for refinancing. This loan was also the obligation I had not yet found that night in New York. The $60 million line Grant opened afterward reused part of the collateral, but the new filing did not fully disclose the Connecticut creditor's priority. The final pin holding the entire structure together was 4 seconds of my finger on a glass surface. I had thought Grant needed the signature because of ego. He did not. He needed the IPO to close before the credit fund reassessed the collateral and before the debt matured. He was not protecting a legacy. He was trying to outrun a clock he had created himself. Over the next 3 weeks, that empire was dismantled through court orders and bank records. The $14.8 million Tribeca condominium was barred from transfer or further encumbrance. Accounts belonging to the 14 entities were frozen. The Cipheron shares purchased with $19 million in royalties were also restricted from trading. 4 of the 6 purchases occurred when Lauren was only 17. But at 22, she signed a beneficial ownership confirmation covering all of the shares, accompanied by a memorandum stating that the source of funds was connected to Sentinel. The charity bearing Victoria's name was audited. Of the $9.6 million it received from Mercer Family Holdings, only about $1.9 million reached arts organizations. Part of the remaining money went to the same communications firm once hired to erase Rebecca from Cipheron's history. The Lake Chelan house was also barred from transfer. It had been purchased with the $8.6 million recorded as a Times beneficiary protection expenditure. In the 3rd week, Lauren claimed through counsel that she lacked technical expertise, had merely followed Grant, and was also a victim. Without Lauren's emails and messages from October through June, I might have believed her. On June 16, she asked an attorney about Section 11 and my rights to Sentinel revenue. On Sunday afternoon, she changed the CLEANROOM trigger. The next morning at 9 hours 28 minutes and 41 seconds, she confirmed the final execution command. Torres said the hardest part was not proving what Lauren had done. It was proving she understood what she was doing. Lauren supplied both herself, legal knowledge in the emails, and technical intent in the privileged log. Approximately $110.3 million in principal and the assets purchased with it might be recoverable to the Rebecca Mercer Trust, but the court still had to resolve ownership, taxes, and creditor claims. I asked Maya and the trustee to draft a plan for court approval. Nothing would be distributed to me personally before approval. The royalties and interest would remain in the trust. Part would protect pay and benefits for the 4,200 employees, and the rest would fund a program bearing Rebecca's name. I did not request that any asset be transferred into my name. Not because I was noble. I simply did not want to live among objects purchased with my mother's royalties and call that justice. On August 23, Torres called me at 7:10 that evening. Victoria had been stopped at Teterboro 20 days earlier. The device in her pocket had been made to resemble a hardware wallet, but it did not contain the key to the fourth digital asset address, as investigators initially believed. The $18 million estimate was based on a false assumption, Torres said. The first three addresses were correct. This device does not control the remaining address. Then what is it? An encrypted storage device. It took us 19 days to extract one file without altering the original device. She paused. Sophie, that device contains a video your mother recorded on the 4th of September 1999, 4 days before she died. 4 days later, I watched the forensic copy of the video in an interview room at an investigative office in Seattle. Torres, Maya, a prosecutor, and a forensic specialist were present. I asked whether I could watch it alone. Torres said no. The metadata showed that the file was created on the 4th of September 1999 and showed no evidence of editing. It did not identify who positioned the camera, but the only surviving copy had been found on the device Victoria carried when she tried to leave Teterboro. The video was not a message for me. That was the first thing I understood. The camera had been placed on a cabinet at a slight angle, low to the ground. It recorded the living room of our old house in Redmond. My mother sat on the edge of a chair in a gray sweater, unaware that the camera was running. Grant stood in front of her. The conversation lasted 14 minutes. 4 moments mattered. At the 2-minute mark, my mother said she had an appointment with the trust's attorney on September 16. She intended to sign 3 documents. The first would terminate all of Grant's access to and operational authority over Sentinel. The second would notify the board about access right contracts he had sold without her approval. The third would establish an independent standby guardian for me if she died or became unable to care for me. My mother stated the third point in the same ordinary tone as the first 2. She already knew I would not be safe if Grant alone controlled my future. That was no longer a suspicion. At the 5-minute mark, Grant said Cipheron would not exist without Sentinel. He repeated it 4 times in different ways. He did not threaten my mother. That was what made me sit straighter. He explained the obligations to investors, the contracts already signed, and what Cipheron would lose if my mother revoked access. He sounded like a man presenting a technical problem. At the 8-minute mark, the door opened. Victoria entered. She came in like someone who had been in that house many times. Victoria did not speak to Grant. She addressed my mother directly. Rebecca, you have to think about the family. Then she said that 32 people would lose their jobs, that my mother's daughter would grow up with a bankrupt father, and that there were ways to resolve the matter without attorneys. Those 3 sentences turned the video into evidence of Victoria's motive and prior knowledge. At the 13-minute mark, my mother stood and looked at both of them. I did not build Sentinel to finance your lives, she said. I built it to do its job correctly. If the 2 of you want a life, build one yourselves. Then she walked out of frame. The video ended. My mother died 4 days later, on the 8th of September, 1999. She never reached the appointment with the attorney on the 16th. At my request, an independent forensic physician reviewed the medical records, death certificate, and every surviving document. My mother had been diagnosed with heart disease in 1996. There was no forensic basis to change the conclusion that she died of natural causes. I asked because I had to ask. The answer was that there was no basis to say my mother had been harmed. The video proved something else. On the 4th of September 1999, Grant and Victoria both knew my mother intended to revoke Grant's Sentinel authority, report the unauthorized contracts, and remove me from his sole control. The Bellcrest file had been prepared before the night the founder key was taken. On June 24, Victoria took the founder key, exported all 411 megabytes of Sentinel source code, and hid the key in a folder labeled Sophie Summer Homework. 6 weeks after my mother died, Grant used that same event to accuse me formally and send me to Bellcrest. That sequence was the entire case. During a counseled interview on August 29, Victoria admitted taking the founder key, copying the source code, and placing the key inside the folder bearing my name. On page 11, she said Rebecca had placed technology above family, that a woman with a husband and child should not build something she refused to share. In the final line, Victoria wrote that she had never intended for me to be sent away. Torres asked whether I wanted to prepare a victim impact statement. I wrote 4 sentences, and it took me 2 hours. I wrote that I would not argue with what Victoria said about my mother, because my mother was not there to answer. I acknowledged Victoria's statement that she had not intended for me to be sent away. I wrote that I was confined at Belcrest for 4 years and 2 months. During that time, Victoria had nearly 1,500 mornings in which she could have made 1 phone call. After I left Belcrest, she had almost 23 more years. I wrote nothing about forgiveness because I did not have an answer and would not invent one for a court file. On September 11, Grant requested a call through his attorney. Torres confirmed that the call from the detention facility would be recorded. I agreed to accept it. An automated voice announced the caller's name. Then Grant spoke. "Sophie, I need your help preserving the family legacy." He did not ask whether I was well. He did not mention my mother. He did not apologize. "I need you to authorize the trust to use the Sentinel rights as collateral for the $300 million refinancing," he said. "If you do not, the Mercer name will be erased from Cipheron. I need you to authorize the trust to use the Sentinel rights as collateral for the $300 million refinancing," Grant said. "If you do not, the Mercer name will be erased from Cipheron." I looked through the glass wall of the interview room. Torres sat outside with a prosecutor. The call was being recorded. Grant knew that. He called anyway. "That loan is your debt," I said. "Not the trust's debt. It was used to keep Cipheron alive." I read the cash flow. Nearly 1/3 of the money went into 4 shell companies. Grant was silent. "You don't understand how a company operates. I understand enough to know that Sentinel cannot be used as collateral for your personal debt. If the creditor seizes my shares, the company will collapse. Cipheron is operating under a transition license and an independent board. The company does not need your debt to survive. 90 days is not a company." "Correct. It is time to build a company that does not need you." I heard him exhale. Grant's voice changed. It was no longer the voice of command. It became the voice he used when he wanted to turn a demand into a family obligation. "Rebecca would not let everything she built be destroyed. Mom spent her final days trying to stop you from controlling it. I am the person who turned Sentinel into a business. You were granted the right to use it for 27 years. You were not given ownership." "You sound like a lawyer." "No, I am reading the contract." He was quiet for a few seconds. "The creditor only needs temporary security," Grant said. "When Cipheron lists again, the Sentinel rights will be released. You used the same portion of the assets to secure 2 loans without fully disclosing the first creditor's priority. That is a technical issue. That is why you are calling me from a detention facility." His voice hardened. "Do you want me to lose everything? I want you to be accountable for your part. I am your father." I had been waiting for that sentence. Not because I wanted to hear it, because I knew he would eventually use it. "You use that sentence only when you need me to give you something," I said. "Not during the years I was at Belcrest, not during the 23 years afterward. I did what was necessary, and now I am doing the same." I stated the decision clearly so the recording could not be reinterpreted. Under the decision I approved with the trustee, the Rebecca Mercer Trust would not guarantee, pledge, or transfer any Sentinel rights to refinance Grant's $300 million loan. There would be no family exception. There would be no signature after the call. "The creditor may proceed against the shares you pledged," I said. "They have no rights to Sentinel. You are erasing your name from your own family." "No." I looked at the words on the file cover in front of me. Rebecca Mercer Trust. "I am putting the right name back." Grant said nothing for nearly 10 seconds. Then he asked, "Are you really going to let me lose Cipheron?" "Cipheron is no longer yours." I ended the call. Torres entered afterward. She asked whether I wanted all future requests for direct contact blocked. Yes. I signed one document. It transferred no ownership. It guaranteed no loan. It saved none of Grant's assets. It required all future communication to go through counsel. That afternoon, Maya notified the Connecticut creditor that Grant had never possessed authority to pledge Sentinel and that the trust would not approve it. My father had needed my signature twice. The first time, he wanted to use it to legitimize rights he had never owned. The second time, he wanted to use it to save his debt. He got that signature neither time. 18 months after the listing was suspended, Cipheron still existed. There was no mass layoff on Tuesday as Grant had threatened. During the restructuring, employee payroll and benefits were not interrupted. No customer system was forced offline. The 90-day transition license was replaced with a long-term agreement issued by the Rebecca Mercer Trust. Cipheron was permitted to continue providing Sentinel to customers, but it could not assign the license, sublicense it, or use any Sentinel right as collateral without the trust's approval. An independent CEO ran the company. An employee-elected representative served on the restructuring committee. After an independent review confirmed that Jonah had not participated in the fraudulent transactions and had complied with the preservation order, the board offered him the position of Chief Technology Officer. He called me before accepting. "Do you think I deserve it?" Jonah asked. "No," I said. "But this is not a reward. It is a responsibility." He accepted the position. Criminal cases take longer than people online imagine. Victoria pleaded guilty after her statements were compared with the video, the 1,999 logs, and the data from the encrypted device. Lauren continued to claim that she had merely followed Grant, but the CLEANROOM log recorded her privileged account, changing the trigger and then confirming the final execution command at 9 hours 28 minutes and 41 seconds. Eventually, Lauren accepted a plea agreement. Grant pleaded not guilty. He called everything a family dispute transformed into a federal case. The jury disagreed. They saw the money flowing through 14 entities, the false records, the $46 million distribution agreement, and the sentence Grant wrote when I was 10. "Let the girl take the blame. She is only 10. No one will listen to her." Grant was convicted on the principal charges. This time, someone listened. I did not attend sentencing. I had spent 27 years allowing my life to revolve around Grant's decisions. I did not want to spend another day watching their final consequences. Torres called immediately after the sentence was imposed. "It's over," she said. "Thank you." That was all. The assets diverted from the trust did not return all at once. The accounts, shares, and real estate still had to pass through courts, tax obligations, and lawful creditor claims. Under the plan Maya and the trustees submitted to the court, recovered assets were held in the Rebecca Mercer Trust. Part protected employee pay and benefits during the restructuring. The rest funded a systems safety research program named for my mother, not a fundraising gala with her photograph on a wall. The program paid the people who built technology, tested it, and spoke when it was misused. 6 months after the final sentence, Cipheron reopened the exhibit area at its Bellevue headquarters. The photograph of Grant in the garage was removed. In its place was Sentinel's first patent record, open to the page containing the line, "Diarra, Rebecca Anne Mercer, principal inventor." Beneath it was one sentence. Sentinel Protocol was created to protect the integrity of critical systems. My name did not appear. That was what I requested. I did not reclaim Sentinel to replace Grant's name with mine. I only returned Rebecca's name to its proper place. I went before business hours on the day the exhibit reopened. Jonah stood at the far end of the hallway. He said nothing when I stopped in front of the patent record. I carried North Shore's metal box. The founder key was inside. The board wanted to place it in a glass case. I refused. It was not a symbol of Cipheron. It belonged in the trust archive with the documents Rebecca left behind. I closed the box. I had once imagined justice would make a louder sound. A sentence. A gavel. A room full of people realizing they had believed the wrong story. But in the end, justice was only the truth recorded in a place where no one could alter it again. I was 10 when Grant turned my name into an accusation. I was 37 when I returned my mother's name to its proper place. This time, no one could erase her again. The message of this story is that justice does not always arrive through grand revenge or a loud moment of victory. Sometimes justice means daring to face the truth, refusing to keep carrying guilt someone else placed on you, and returning everything to its proper place. Family gives no one the right to betray, manipulate, or steal another person's dignity. Sophie did not win because she destroyed Grant, but because she refused to become like him. She protected innocent people, kept the company alive, and restored the name of the mother who had been erased from history. True strength does not lie in holding power, but in how we use that power without losing ourselves.